Chapter 42. What? The four elders suddenly stood up, their eyes wide open. They completely lost their composure. The scene in front of them was unbelievable. Impossible. This doesn't make sense. The inner disciples of the three academies sucked in a breath of cold air and rubbed their eyes. When they looked carefully again, they couldn't believe it. Wang Feng's left arm was cut off and flew high into the air. A line of blood splashed across the sky. The severed arm flew far away and landed below the sword discourse arena. The 5 fingers were slightly bent and twitching, as if they wanted to take one's life, especially the inner disciples of the Thunder Academy. They couldn't believe that their senior brother Wang Feng's left arm was cut off. From the top to the bottom of the sword discourse arena, there was a stream of blood splattering everywhere. It was a shocking sight. Wang Feng fell to the side, his face full of pain. The muscles on his severed arm wriggled, and blood spurted out like a sword. His right hand tightly grasped the 100 refined sword and glared at Chu Mu with hatred. He clenched his teeth and didn't let out any painful groans. The veins on his forehead bulged, and the hatred in his eyes was like a sword. It was as if he wanted to kill Chu Mu with his gaze. The entire place was silent. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling could be heard clearly. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Han Rui's eyes were lifeless. He muttered to himself in a voice that even he couldn't hear. Impossible. This is simply impossible. I'm dreaming. I must be dreaming. Chi Bai was also muttering to himself, his face pale and green. If this was true, it meant that Chu Mu had the strength to kill a peak 8th phase cultivator. Only 9th phase swordsmen could defeat Chu Mu. The significance of this was completely different. The difference in strength between stage 8 and stage 9 was obvious, and the difference in status was also very obvious. In the inner sect, disciples who had reached stage 9 had another title, Elite Disciple. Elite disciples didn't belong to the 3 academies. They belonged to the Green Peak main palace. In other words, once a disciple of the 3 academies broke through to 9th phase, they would become an elite disciple of the main palace. Zhuang Qiuxing's face was ashen. He had completely given up. He knew that he was no match for Chu Mu. Among the inner disciples of the High Wind Courtyard, there was one person whose face was filled with disbelief and bitterness. He was Li Yang. They were both at the early stage of the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm, but Chu Mu was already able to defeat someone at the peak of the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. On the other hand, when he fought a senior brother at the middle stage of the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm from the Towering Wind Institution, he was barely able to stay undefeated. This was the real gap. When he took the important step, he realized that the person he thought he could surpass was only a distant back view. Chu Mu stood on the sword discourse platform, his body as straight as a sword, pointing straight at the sky. His expression was indifferent as he looked straight at Wang Feng, without the slightest bit of pity, Immediately after, Chu Mu raised his sword, and the hearts of the inner sect disciples rose to their throats. None of them could breathe as they stared at Chu Mu without blinking, waiting for the moment of life and death. Stop! At the most critical moment, the elder of the Thunder Courtyard shouted, Chu Mu, you have already won and proved to the 3 courtyards that you are stronger than Wang Feng. There is no need to kill him. You must know that when it is possible to make mistakes, one should be lenient. Immediately, everyone's gaze fell on Chu Mu, waiting to see what choice Chu Mu would make. This was the elder of the Thunder Courtyard. He held great power, and his cultivation was extremely high. He had long surpassed the Sword Qi realm. Even if he could not directly control Chu Mu, once he offended him, it would be easy for him to make things difficult for Chu Mu. Therefore, the inner disciples of the 3 courtyards all felt that if it were them, they would choose not to kill Wang Feng. It was unwise to offend an elder for this. They felt that Chu Mu should be the same as them, unwilling to offend an elder. Wang Feng stared at Chu Mu with hatred. In his heart, he hoped that Chu Mu would not kill him. As long as he could survive, he could find another opportunity to kill Chu Mu. He had to kill Chu Mu no matter what. Elder, in the life and death arena, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, only life and death. It was Wang Feng who first proposed the life and death arena. It is not to prove who is stronger, but to settle the grudge and kill me. Chu Mu was neither slow nor fast, neither servile nor overbearing, as he said. Swords are lethal weapons. Sword techniques are killing techniques. This is the philosophy that I have always adhered to. I am a swordsman, and I must kill Wang Feng. I hope you can understand. Although Chu Mu did not agree with the elder of the Thunder Courtyard, his words were not too harsh. He did not embarrass the elder of the Thunder Courtyard. Although the elder was unhappy, he did not feel that he had lost face. Instead, he was surprised by Chu Mu's words, "The sword is a weapon, and the swordsmanship is the art of killing." Not only him, the other 3 elders and the inner disciples all trembled when they heard this. They only felt that this sentence explained the true meaning of a swordsman's sword practice. Without saying a word, the elder of the Thunder Courtyard sat back down with a cold face. The meaning was clear. He would not stop Wang Feng. The law enforcement elder thought for a while and did not say anything. Wang Feng's heart sank. He clenched his teeth and slammed his sword on the ground with his right hand. He flew up with great force. Sword Qi surged and rushed toward the 100 refined sword. With a fierce slash, a faint purple sword Qi slashed toward Chu Mu. Moreover, it rushed toward Chu Mu in an attempt to launch a desperate counterattack. However, as he had lost an arm, he could not maintain his balance. The sword Qi was easily dodged by Chu Mu. The trajectory of the sword was even clearer in Chu Mu's eyes. Chu Mu's footsteps were messy. His body swayed like a willow. His speed was extremely fast, leaving behind many afterimages. He quickly approached Wang Feng with a cold, killing intent. The snow-white sword light was like a rainbow piercing through the sky. With a Qi-la sound, Chu Mu's figure passed by Wang Feng. Wang Feng's lips moved, but he couldn't make any sound. His eyes were wide open, full of resentment and unwillingness. A wound appeared on his neck, and blood spurted out like a fountain. The inner disciples of the 3 courtyards opened their eyes wide again. They felt like their throats were being strangled by an invisible hand. They could not make a sound. Their eyes reflected Wang Feng's figure as he slowly fell backwards. With a bang, dust flew up, and the 100 refinements sword fell with a clang and rolled to the side. Life and death sword arena. Regardless of victory or defeat, only life and death. In this battle, Wang Feng died. After a long time, the law enforcement elder sighed and said in a heavy tone, "As the law enforcement elder of our sect, I sincerely hope that the disciples of our sect can unite and live in harmony. There can be competition between us, but we cannot bully others and we cannot plot against them. Everything has to be based on the strength of our own sect and the strength of our sect. If there are any conflicts, try to resolve them peacefully." The law enforcement elders' words were like the conclusion of this life and death battle. Soon after, the 4 elders stood up and left, but their hearts were still shaken. When the elder of the Soaring Wind Institute left, he specially took a few more glances at Chu Mu. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. Chu Mu stepped over Wang Feng's corpse and walked down the sword arena. The disciples of the Soaring Wind Institute consciously made way for Chu Mu as if they were welcoming a king. They were all silent as they looked at Chu Mu with eyes full of reverence. Only Qi Bai's gaze was very complicated. There was anger, unwillingness, worry, and so on, but there was no reverence. Gradually, Chu Mu walked away. The inner disciples of the 3 academies all looked at Chu Mu's back as he slowly walked away. From his straight figure, they felt a kind of pride, a kind of sharpness, 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 a kind of sword-like sharpness, a kind of sharpness, a kind of sharpness, a kind of sharpness, a kind of sword-like 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 sharpness, a kind they couldn't help but think that Chumu would shake the entire inner sect and the sword school. As for Wang Feng, he was already dead. All of his achievements were scattered with the wind, and all of his glory was destroyed, buried in dust. Chapter 43. The sword is a weapon. Swordsmanship is a killing technique. These words were spread around the 3 inner courtyards. Every disciple, elder, and elder knew about it. Even the main hall and the outer disciples had heard about it. The sword is a weapon. Swordsmanship is a killing technique. Concise and perfect explanation. The elder of the sword pavilion repeated it and smiled as he muttered to himself, "This Chumu really surprises me." The inner disciples of the 3 courtyards also firmly remembered this sentence. Maybe they couldn't understand the profoundness of it, but they felt that this sentence was very imposing and had a kind of peerless edge. Because of this, many inner disciples kept saying this sentence. Some inner disciples even said this sentence before they practiced swordsmanship. It seemed to make them look more imposing and more focused when practicing swordsmanship. In the 91st pavilion of the towering wind courtyard, Li Wei brought the fragrant dishes to the balcony on the 2nd floor for Chumu to eat. Li Wei's big eyes were filled with admiration and admiration. "Senior brother, the sword is a weapon, swordsmanship is a killing technique." This sentence, the more it is repeated, the more interesting it is. It seems to contain a great principle. Li Wei stuck out her tongue and said excitedly, "Also, everyone outside is saying that senior brother is the best swordsman in the 3 inner courtyards. Only senior brother Xiao Qianfeng of our towering wind courtyard can compare with you." When Chumu heard this, he only smiled and didn't care. He didn't care about titles like best swordsmanship or best inner disciple. Those were just false titles. False titles would only bring him unnecessary trouble. Only swordsmanship and swordsmanship were true. He didn't know that right now, the 3 inner courtyards were having an intense debate about whether or not Chumu's title of #1 sword artist in the 3 inner courtyards was true. Some believed that it was true, and some believed that it was absolutely true, while some believed that it wasn't true. This was because each of the 3 academies originally had the most powerful disciple. Originally, the most powerful disciple of the soaring wind courtyard was Xiao Qianfeng, who was at the 8th stage of the sword Qi realm. His sword techniques alone were unrivaled in the soaring wind courtyard. As for the rumbling thunder courtyard and the jade water courtyard, they each had a disciple at the peak of the 8th stage, whose sword techniques were astonishing. That's right, senior brother Xiao Qianfeng and the others are indeed extremely formidable. However, do all of you think that they would be able to kill Desheng, who is at the peak of the 8th level and has mastered an intermediate sword art, with a cultivation at the early stage of the 7th level of the sword Qi realm, and without being injured? When this question was asked, everyone became silent. Even the loyal supporters of Xiao Qianfeng and the others didn't dare to say that Xiao Qianfeng and the others had such a battle record. It had to be known that the early stage of the 8th phase sword Qi cultivation was 2 times that of the early stage of the 7th phase, and the peak of the 8th phase was 3 times that of the early stage of the 7th phase. Adding on the purity of the sword Qi, the difference was even greater. What kind of swordsmanship? Was that why he was able to ignore the difference in cultivation level and kill powerful enemies without getting injured? Only Chumu could do it. Don't be too complacent. When senior brother he returns, he will naturally seek justice from Chumu. This was the voice of some of the disciples of the Thunder Academy. "Ah, you are Chumu. As expected, you are extraordinary." The eyes of the High Wind Palm Academy flowed with a sharp light, like a treasured sword. It landed on Chu Mu's body, causing Chu Mu to feel a trace of piercing pain. It was as if countless small and sharp swords were cutting into his skin. Even the sword Qi, protecting his body, was unable to do anything. The Lingfeng sect master was a tall, middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. He had a slender figure and had the look of a modest gentleman. He was dressed in a green robe which made him look even more elegant. He was a distinguished person. After dinner, Chu Mu was sitting on the balcony to rest. A deacon came and said that the High Wind Palm Academy had summoned him. Chu Mu followed and saw the High Wind Palm Academy, which was the highest authority of the High Wind Academy. As soon as they met, Chu Mu first saluted with his sword, but the High Wind Palm Academy didn't say a word. They had been sizing up Chu Mu the entire time. Only now did they say a word. The sword is a murderous weapon, and the swordsmanship is a killing technique. After reciting it in a low voice, the eyes of the High Wind Palm Academy became even brighter and sharper. Where did you hear this from? It was passed down by my master. Chu Mu said, Your master? You already have a master. There was a trace of disappointment in the High Wind Palm Academy's words, but it quickly disappeared. Your master must be a swordsman with extremely high attainments in swordsmanship. I wonder what his name is. Academy Master, my master is known as a sword master. He is not in this world. As for his name, he has never mentioned it. Chu Mu said, Yes, it's a pity that I can't meet such a strange person. A sword master. What kind of glory and attainment is that? The High Wind Palm Academy sighed. He didn't know that Chu Mu, who was in front of him, was a sword grandmaster. In terms of swordsmanship, even he couldn't compare to him. I didn't ask you to come here for a big matter. It's just that your reputation is resounding now, and you are also a disciple of my High Wind Academy, so I specially came to take a look. The High Wind Palm Academy explained with a smile. Right now, the 3 academies are spreading the news that you are the #1 swordsman in the 3 academies. Elder Lin also saw with his own eyes that you used your exquisite swordsmanship to make up for the gap in cultivation. In the end, with your cultivation at the early stage of the 7th stage, you killed Wang Feng, who was at the peak of the 8th stage. I am very curious about this. After the Academy Master saw me, did you feel that I was worthy of my name? Chu Mu wasn't afraid at all and smiled. You're very confident. The High Wind Palm Academy shook his head and smiled. What I have seen now is indeed not bad and extraordinary. However, I still need to verify it. Make your move and use your full strength. If you can shock me, I will give you an opportunity. When Chu Mu heard this, he couldn't help but think of the sword force that the Sword Pavilion Elder had taught him. Perhaps, without the guidance of the Sword Pavilion Elder, it was only a matter of time for Chu Mu to comprehend the sword force. However, without the guidance, there was a clear difference. At the very least, Chu Mu now had a clear goal and knew how to move forward. He wasn't at a loss and fumbling around. Chu Mu no longer hesitated and unsheathed his sword. He used the basic move of the clear wind sword technique, and his sword was like a clear wind. Clear wind sword technique, not bad. The High Wind Palm Academy smiled and didn't move, allowing Chu Mu to attack. Chu Mu also knew that the High Wind Palm Academy was definitely an expert in the Qi transformation realm. Even if he used his full strength, he wouldn't be able to hurt the High Wind Palm Academy at all. Thus, he didn't hold back and used the 3 killing moves of the Clear Wind sword technique. The High Wind Palm Academy still didn't move. The 3 killing moves of the Clear Wind sword technique couldn't do anything to him. Not bad. The Clear Wind sword technique has reached perfection. You have surprised me even more. You are worthy of the title of #1 sword disciple of the 3 academies. However, it's still not enough to shock me. The High Wind Palm Academy smiled. He didn't even move his hair. Do you have any more powerful moves? More powerful moves? Of course. During the battle with Wang Feng, Chu Mu didn't use external sword qi. Now he didn't plan to use it. However, The clear wind sword technique didn't incorporate the mysteries of the wind. "I still have one move," said Chu-Mu. Shortly after, he entered a special state. The 100 refinement sword slashed through the air, and a gust of wind abruptly arose. A light cyan color condensed and transformed into a nearly meter-long wind blade that slashed out. The High Wind Palm Academy's eyes widened. They were filled with shock and disbelief. His expression was extremely excited. His lips trembled slightly. He stared at Chu-Mu as if he had discovered a rare treasure. The clear wind killing move was shattered. The High Wind Palm Academy flashed and appeared beside Chu-Mu like a ghost. This gave Chu-Mu a fright, especially the High Wind Palm Academy's eyes. They were shining like a miser who had seen a pile of gold. Wind. Concept of wind. You actually comprehended the concept of wind. The High Wind Palm Academy was so excited that he couldn't control himself. After a long time, the High Wind Palm Academy slowly calmed down. However, he was still very shocked. "It's hard to believe that you actually comprehended the concept of wind. Although it's not even 10%, but this is simply like a dream." The High Wind Palm Academy muttered to himself. Chu-Mu didn't say a word. He vaguely guessed that some of the mysteries of the wind that he had comprehended might be the so-called concept of wind. "Come, tell me, how did you comprehend the concept of wind?" the High Wind Palm Academy said to Chu-Mu. His attitude was much gentler and more intimate than before. As for Chu-Mu, he was also very curious about this mystery. Since the High Wind Palm Academy could see it with a glance, it meant that he was more familiar with it. It just so happened that he could solve his doubts. The two sides hit it off and began to discuss. Chapter 44. Concept of Wind. It seems that I have unknowingly comprehended not only the concept of wind, but also the concept of clouds. After leaving the pavilion, Chu-Mu pondered as he walked. From the Soaring Wind Academy, Chu-Mu had a clearer understanding of concepts and his own perception of how much he had comprehended them. 3,000 concepts. This was what the Soaring Wind Academy had said. It meant that there were 3,000 types of concepts, just like the 3,000 great worlds. Everything one saw, everything one heard, and everything one could feel could all be considered as a concept. I have already comprehended 10% of the concept of wind. As for the concept of clouds, it is less than 10%, but more than 5%. Chu-Mu told the Soaring Wind Academy about the circumstances under which he had comprehended the concept, causing the Soaring Wind Academy to be shocked once again. Cultivating an intermediate sword technique actually allowed him to comprehend a concept? It was hard to believe. A Chi transformation realm expert, like the Soaring Wind Academy, was very clear on one point. The higher the level of the sword technique, the easier it was to comprehend concept. Simply put, sword techniques were the process of transforming the formless concept into something that could be cultivated. Cultivating sword techniques was not only about comprehending the sword, but also about comprehending a concept. However, beginner, intermediate, and advanced sword arts were relatively simple and did not contain any conception. Therefore, it was almost impossible to comprehend a conception. Only after reaching the transcendent sword technique would it begin to contain a trace of a concept. However, wanting to comprehend a concept from a transcendent sword technique was incomparably difficult. It was almost impossible, unless one's comprehension was close to monstrous. However, Chu-Mu had managed to comprehend a concept from an intermediate sword technique. It was the first time that he had completely cultivated it. Any sword cultivator who had comprehended a concept would find it inconceivable. The Soaring Wind Academy was incomparably shocked. Chu-Mu's comprehension was too terrifying. After being excited, the Soaring Wind Academy believed that he did not have the qualifications to accept Chu-Mu as a disciple, so he gave up on that thought. Instead, he told Chu-Mu about the process of his comprehension of the concept of wind as well as his various experiences. This allowed Chu Mu's concept of wind to stabilize from its original 10%. Chu Mu didn't tell the High Wind Academy that other than the concept of wind, he had also comprehended the concept of clouds. Otherwise, he didn't know how shocked he would be. This was because one thing was certain. After comprehending a concept, the difficulty of comprehending a second or third concept would continuously increase. Although I have comprehended the concept, it is very difficult to improve on it. According to what the sect master said, he has been comprehending the concept for over 10 years and has only comprehended 30%. Chu Mu muttered to himself. The monastery master comprehended the concept of wind at the severe gale cliff. According to him, the severe gale cliff will help me comprehend the concept of wind. Since that's the case, I should make a trip to the severe gale cliff. However, the severe gale cliff is used by the sword faction to punish disciples who have made mistakes. Normally I can't enter. Chu Mu was a bit vexed. He wanted to enter the severe gale cliff, but disciples who didn't make mistakes couldn't enter. Therefore, he had to make a mistake. Moreover, this mistake had to be just right. If it was too serious, he would be expelled. If it was too light, he would only be warned. Logically speaking, since the Soaring Wind Academy had mentioned this point, there should be a way to help Chu Mu enter the severe gale cliff. For example, if he went to talk to the law-enforcing elder, it might be possible. However, he didn't do so. This showed that he wasn't willing, no matter what his thoughts were. Therefore, Chu Mu had to think of a way himself. He began to recall the rules of the inner sect that he had seen before and gradually had an idea in his heart. At this moment, Chu Mu felt a figure flash in front of him. When he looked over, he saw Chi Bai's figure. Chi Bai also saw Chu Mu and stopped in his tracks. His face turned green, red, and white. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He wanted to fiercely glare at Chu Mu and throw a few threatening words. However, when he thought of the scene where Chu Mu killed Wang Feng on the life and death sword arena, he trembled and couldn't speak. Chu Mu's eyes lit up. His thoughts became clear. He strode towards Chi Bai, causing Chi Bai's face to change. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes, and he subconsciously dodged to the side. Chu Mu flashed and appeared in front of Chi Bai. He didn't even say a word. In front of Chi Bai's eyes, a snow-white sword light dazzled his eyes, causing him to slightly squint. Then he felt a sharp pain on his left cheek. It was as if half of his face was about to be slapped away. He could even feel his teeth loosening and his cheek swelling. Before he could let out a scream, Chi Bai's right cheek was also slapped hard. Then, countless sword light flashed in front of his eyes. The left and right sides of his face were continuously slapped. Chi Bai's head was constantly tilted to the right and left. His neck seemed to be constantly stretched, his body swayed, and his head became dizzy. Chu Mu estimated that he had slapped enough and sheathed his sword. Chi Bai's body swayed and he saw stars. His head was spinning and he fell back. He didn't look like a human at all. His left and right cheeks were swollen like two big steam buns. The black and red color of his cheeks were shining like ripe red plums. The slightest touch would break the skin and cause the juice inside to flow out. Chu Mu didn't use his full strength, and he also controlled the strength and angle of his slaps. Therefore, there was no blood. After a while, Chi Bai's mind cleared up a little. He immediately felt a burning pain on both sides of his face, as if a red-hot branding iron was stuck on his face. Under the branding iron, there were also countless red-hot iron nails that were deeply embedded. This made him groan and moan, unable to say a word. But his eyes were staring at Chu Mu with hatred, as if he couldn't wait to swallow Chu Mu. "Do you feel unconvinced?" Chu Mu smiled faintly. "If you want to do it yourself, I don't mind fighting with you on the life and death sword arena." The words life and death sword arena made Chi Bai's heart tremble. His eyes averted, and the pain on his cheeks made him feel extremely painful. "I see that you don't have the courage to fight with me on the life and death sword arena. If you feel unconvinced, then go to the law enforcement hall and report me," Chumu said and turned to leave. Speaking of which, Chi-Bai could only blame himself for being unlucky. Originally, Chumu was thinking about what kind of mistake he should make to be punished at Fierce Wind Cliff. Chi-Bai just happened to appear in front of him. Chi-Bai gave Chumu a very bad impression. He was purely a villain, but he didn't dare to make a move himself, and he couldn't threaten Chumu. Therefore, Chumu was too lazy to pay attention to him. He didn't expect that it would come in handy now. Chumu clearly remembered the rules of the inner sect disciples. Taking the initiative to injure other inner sect disciples was against the rules. However, taking the initiative to cause harm had a certain degree of knowledge. According to the severity of the injury, it would be divided. If it was a death, then Chumu would most likely be very miserable. If it was a cripple, then Chumu would be expelled. However, right now it was only a flesh wound that looked rather miserable. It was like being judged at Fierce Wind Cliff to reflect on one's mistakes. Next, Chumu only needed to cultivate while waiting for the law enforcement hall's summons. Chapter 45. After returning to the pavilion, Chumu entered the pond again to practice his swordsmanship. It was the basic swordsmanship. The depth of the pond was just enough to submerge Chumu's chest. Hence, there was a lot of resistance when he practiced. It was very obvious that he had to use more energy to make his sword faster, steadier, and more accurate. The effect of this kind of practice was several times better than practicing on land. Every time he finished practicing, he could feel that the sword in his hand seemed to be lighter and easier to wield. However, he was very clear that this was temporary. At this realm, it was very difficult to improve even a little bit. Stabbing, chopping, slicing, and so on. Every basic swordsmanship movement was done, causing the pond water to ripple. I wonder if I can comprehend the concept of water if I practice like this. As he cultivated, Chumu suddenly had this thought, but he immediately discarded it. The possibility of this happening was extremely small. After all, he had already comprehended 2 types of concepts. If he wanted to comprehend a 3rd type, it would be even more difficult. 2 hours later, Chumu finished his sword practice. Using the rocks by the pond, he used the wind-swaying willow body technique and leapt to the 2nd floor. He dried his body and put on his clothes. Li Wei also brought up a steaming hot and fragrant meal and a bottle of wine. "Little Wei, help me prepare some dry food and water." "Let's prepare for 3 days first," Chumu said. "Yes, senior brother." Li Wei quickly nodded. "Is senior brother planning to go out and gain experience?" "Yes, I plan to go to Fierce Gale Cliff to cultivate," Chumu said. "Fierce Gale Cliff?" Li Wei's eyes widened even more. Her small mouth formed an O shape. For a moment, she did not react. "Go and prepare," Chumu did not explain. "Yes, senior brother." Li Wei was in a daze. When she reached the stairs, she remembered that Fierce Gale Cliff was a place to reflect on one's mistakes. Did senior brother Chu do something wrong? She could not help but worry. After eating dinner and resting for a short while, Chumu started to comprehend the sword force. When it was deep into the night, he eliminated all distracting thoughts and allowed his mind to be empty without any pressure. After meditating for a moment, he lay down on his bed and fell asleep peacefully. The next day, Zhang Xian woke up on time and began a new day of cultivation. Not long after, he came to the wind sword platform to cultivate again, but there was still no one there. After cultivating for a while, Han Rui was the first to come out. He was even more unwilling to fight with Chumu, so after chatting for a while, he also began to practice his swordsmanship. Before long, more and more people came out. "Morning, senior brother Chu." "Senior brother Chu, you're the first one to come here to practice your swordsmanship again. You're really a role model for us. We should learn from senior brother Chu." "Senior brother Chu, please give me some pointers on my swordsmanship." Since he had killed Wang Feng at the Life and Death sword platform, Chumu's status in the Wind Sword Institute had undergone a huge change. No matter how long they had been in the institute, all the disciples who had reached stage 7 of the Sword Chi realm all called Chu Mu senior brother. As for the disciples who had reached stage 8, although they did not call him senior brother, they were very respectful to him. Chu Mu also responded with a few words with a smile. Everyone was very tactful and did not disturb him. They all began to practice their swordsmanship. At this moment, Yanling came over. When everyone saw him, they knew that he was a law enforcement disciple. Chu Mu, come with me, Yanling said helplessly. Okay. Chu Mu smiled and sheathed his sword. He was very confident. What's going on? Why is the law enforcement disciple looking for senior brother Chu again? Is there someone else who wants to challenge senior brother Chu to the life and death sword platform? Are you stupid? Wang Feng was killed. Wang Feng was ranked 2nd in the Thunder Institute. Even He Kaming, who was ranked 1st in the Thunder Institute, did not dare to say that he could kill Wang Feng without being injured. Now, which inner disciple in the 3 institutes dares to challenge senior brother Chu to the life and death sword platform? Then what did senior brother Chu do wrong? Who knows? Han Rui said thoughtfully, Chu Mu, according to my understanding of you, you would not make such a low-level mistake. Yanling looked at Chu Mu and asked suspiciously, It's hard for people not to make mistakes sometimes. Chu Mu knew what Yanling was talking about and laughed. Yanling shook his head helplessly and said, Anyway, when you reach the law enforcement hall, don't make any more mistakes. This was the 2nd time that Chu Mu had entered the law enforcement hall. The law enforcement elder was already sitting upright. Lu Shui was standing at the side. When she saw Chu Mu enter, she glanced at him coldly and snorted. On the other side, there was a person with a white veil on his head. His face was much bigger than the average person's. At this moment, he was staring at Chu Mu with hatred, as if he wanted to kill Chu Mu with his eyes. Chu Mu looked at him and was amused. He deliberately pointed at this person. He looked at Yanling and asked in surprise, Senior Brother Yan, who is this pig-headed person? Lu Shui could not help but snort. She quickly covered her mouth. Yanling was stunned at first. Then he smiled bitterly. The law enforcement elder did not say a word. His eyes were still closed, but the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. As for the pig-headed person, his eyes were almost spitting fire. He wanted to burn Chu Mu to ashes. He groaned a few times, but could not speak a complete sentence. Chu Mu, a disciple of the Soaring Wind Institute. The law enforcement elder opened his eyes and looked at Chu Mu. He said righteously, Chi Bai, a disciple of the Soaring Wind Institute, accused you of hurting him for no reason. Is this true? Yes, Chu Mu admitted without hesitation. Do you know that the sect rules state that inner sect disciples are not allowed to hurt each other for no reason? But you hurt Chi Bai. This is a violation of the sect rules. The law enforcement elder was not angry. Let me ask you, why did you hurt Chi Bai? Elder, I don't find him pleasing to the eye. Chu Mu gave a very strong reason. The law enforcement elder, Yanling and Lu Shui, were stunned. Then their expressions became strange. The law enforcement elder did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yanling and Lu Shui did not know whether to laugh or cry. Especially Lu Shui. She could only force herself not to laugh. Her shoulders were slightly trembling. Chi Bai, who had been glaring fiercely at Chu Mu, almost spat out a mouthful of blood when he heard Chu Mu's powerful reason. He felt as if his head had been heavily hit, and his vision went black. He felt a wave of dizziness, and he staggered 2 steps back, almost falling down. You don't like others, but this is not a reason for you to hurt them. You hurt your fellow disciples for no reason, which is a violation of the 7th rule of the inner sect. But you did not hurt your foundation, so you don't need to be severely punished. The law enforcement elder said slowly, Chu Mu, according to the sect rules, I sentence you to 7 days at the fierce wind cliff. Do you accept? I accept, Chumu said. His purpose was to go to the fierce wind cliff. This was just what he wanted. Chi-bai, do you have any objection to my sentence? The law enforcement elder looked at Chi-bai and asked. Chi-bai hurriedly shook his head and hummed. Yen-ling, take Chumu to the fierce wind cliff and inform his sword servant. The law enforcement elder said. Yes, elder. Yen-ling looked at Chumu helplessly and took Chumu out of the law enforcement hall. After Chumu and Chi-bai left, a trace of doubt flashed through the law enforcement elder's eyes. He felt that there seemed to be other reasons. Although he did not have much contact with Chumu, the law enforcement elder thought that he had some understanding of Chumu. He should not be the kind of person who would make such a mistake, but he could not figure it out. Senior Brother Yen, tell me about the fierce wind cliff. Chumu said. The fierce wind cliff is not a good place. The wind is like a knife. It's unbearable. When Yen-ling mentioned the fierce wind cliff, his body trembled slightly. His tone was full of fear. For inner sect disciples, the fierce wind cliff is like purgatory. I really don't know why you would make such a low-level mistake. Senior Brother Yen, are you also going to the fierce wind cliff to reflect on your mistakes? Chumu asked suddenly. No, you can't say this carelessly. Yen-ling hurriedly said. I'm a law enforcement disciple. How can I knowingly break the law? It's just that sometimes I have to take people to the fierce wind cliff. One time out of curiosity, I experienced it. It was really uncomfortable. Chumu smiled and asked Yen-ling more about the fierce wind cliff. Chapter 46. Chumu finally experienced the power of severe wind cliff. That wind was like a sharpened knife that cut through hair. It came straight at him, cutting his face and body. After Yen-ling brought Chumu to fierce gale cliff, he didn't stop and turned to leave. The incomparably strong wind whistled in his face, blowing his scalp and tearing his clothes to shreds. Chumu felt that it was very difficult for him to stand still. His entire body was practically blown against the mountain wall. He couldn't open his eyes and could only turn around to face the mountain wall with his back facing the wind. Is Senior Yen so afraid of fierce gale cliff? It turns out that this place is really bad. Chumu couldn't help but think. If it was someone else, they would definitely feel uncomfortable and painful being blown by this wind. Luckily, I have the sword aura protection secret technique. A layer of invisible sword aura is attached to the surface of my skin, blocking the wind. He faced the cliff and muttered to himself. Because he was facing the cliff, he could open his eyes and see the cliff clearly. This cliff didn't have the slightest trace of man-made excavation. It was completely blown out by the wind. Every trace seemed to have the shadow of the wind. It was messy and without any pattern. But as he looked at it, Chumu felt that there seemed to be some mystery in it. It was about to come out, but it was stuck and couldn't come out. He kept staring until his eyes were sore. This feeling still didn't come out, and he had to give up temporarily. At this time, he realized that the wind that was tearing his hair and tearing his clothes had become much weaker. He slowly turned around and faced his back to the mountain wall. Although the wind was still strong and constantly howling, it had already reached a tolerable level. How do I comprehend the concept of wind? Chumu thought to himself. Although his goal was clear, he didn't know where to start. The High Wind Palm Academy said that different people have different ways of comprehending the concept. My method may not be effective for you. Therefore, only the method you find is the most suitable for you. The concept of wind from before was completely comprehended under the circumstances where he was unaware of it. Since I can't think of anything, I'll just practice my sword techniques. My state of wind was comprehended from the clear wind sword technique. Hopefully, I can gain something from the clear wind sword technique, Chumu thought to himself after thinking for a while. However, he knew that his breeze swordsmanship had already reached perfection, and it would be difficult for him to gain anything from it. Without any hesitation, Zhang Xian drew his sword and began practicing the breeze swordsmanship. The strong wind continuously blew from the front, not stopping for even a second. Chu Mu's breeze swordsmanship was affected, and he couldn't move as freely as before. Isn't practicing sword arts in such a gale the same as practicing sword arts in the water, different from practicing sword arts in a different way? If I can execute the clear wind sword technique to perfection in this strong wind, I might be able to break through the limits of the clear wind sword technique and comprehend its essence. Breeze caress. A breeze blew over, and the killing intent that appeared was shattered by the strong wind. Dazzling breeze. Before the 8 killing intents could be destroyed, they were also shattered by the strong wind. Absolute kill of the clear wind. The nearly 1 meter long light green wind blade was the absolute kill of the breeze with the concept of wind. It was very powerful, but it only flew 3 to 4 meters before it was blown to pieces by the strong wind that suddenly increased in strength. The wind that blew over started to become unstable. Sometimes it was a cool breeze, sometimes it was a howling gale, sometimes it was a violent gale, and sometimes it was calm. Under these circumstances, Chu Mu practiced the cool breeze sword art over and over again. However, the moment his cool breeze sword art was used, it would often be shattered by the wind, losing its power. However, he wasn't discouraged. He forgot about the concept of wind and everything else. He only thought about practicing sword techniques and adapting to this kind of environment. When he was tired, he stopped to rest. When he used up all his sword chi, he stopped to recover. When he was hungry, he ate the dry food that Li Wei brought over. When he was thirsty, he drank the water that Li Wei brought over. When the strong wind was like a blade, he turned around and faced the mountain wall. He continued to stare at the countless messy marks left by the wind, hoping to comprehend something. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Chu Mu only closed his eyes to take a short nap. When he woke up, he was full of energy and continued to practice. The next day, he still had to practice the Zhongyuan sword chi manual. When a swordsman was in the sword chi realm, the practice of sword chi was completely the transformation of the chi within the body. It didn't have much to do with the outside world. However, when he practiced the second level of the sword chi protective mystic technique, he encountered great difficulty. The sword chi protective mystic technique was formed from external sword chi. However, in this environment where the strong wind was like a blade, the surrounding air was constantly being attacked. This made it difficult for Chu Mu to mobilize the sword chi within 2 meters of him. I don't believe that I can't do it. A wave of stubbornness surged up. Chu Mu focused all of his attention, feeling the chi around him and controlling the sword chi around him. He controlled it bit by bit. Even though the strong wind constantly blew and scattered it, Chu Mu was still able to gather a small portion. Little by little, it became a lot. After expending a great deal of effort, Chu Mu finally finished practicing the sword chi protective mystic technique. He felt both mentally and physically exhausted. He had no choice but to stop and rest for a while. Then he continued to practice the clear wind sword art. He didn't know if doing this would allow him to deepen his understanding of the concept of wind. He could only do it subconsciously and work hard. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The dry rations and water that Li Wei had prepared were all gone. Li Wei once again brought them over. She had originally planned to stay a while longer, but the wind here was too strong. With only a stage 5 cultivation, she simply couldn't withstand it and had to leave. On the 4th day, Chu Mu once again practiced the Zhongyuan sword chi manual. After he finished, he practiced the sword chi protective mystic technique. He suddenly discovered that the range of sword chi he could mobilize had exceeded 2 meters, reaching nearly 2.5 meters. It seems that practicing in this environment is quite useful. He muttered. He was even more motivated to practice. The greater the range of sword chi a sword master could control, the more powerful they would be. According to Chu Mu's knowledge, The strongest sword master in the Sword Arts Association on Earth could control the range of sword chi up to 100 meters. It was very powerful. One sword chi could cut open a mountain. Clear wind blowing. A clear wind was once again blown away by the strong wind. However, Chumu could feel that it lasted longer. Dazzling wind. 8 streaks of killing intent intertwined and collided with the strong wind. They left 8 faint marks before they were shattered. Clear wind kill. A 1-meter-long wind blade was shot out. It flew 4 or 5 meters, leaving behind a faint mark before it shattered. All of this indicated that Chumu's practice in these 3 days had significant results. However, his understanding of the concept of wind still hadn't deepened. However, Chumu had a feeling that if he had more time, he would be able to see something from the marks left behind by the strong wind. Chapter 47. The Thunder Academy was one of the 3 inner academies. It was compulsory to learn the Thunder sword technique. The inner disciples of the Thunder Academy had always been the most active and arrogant among the 3 academies. In terms of overall strength, the Thunder Academy was superior to the Soaring Wind Academy and the Jade Water Academy. But now, the Thunder Academy was no longer as lively as it used to be. It was dead silent. When Hikeming walked into the Thunder Academy, he frowned slightly. A trace of doubt and confusion flashed in his eyes. This was completely different from the Thunder Academy he was familiar with. Although the path was still the same, the pavilion was still the same, and the scenery was the same, the atmosphere was different. I've only been away for less than a month. What happened? Hikeming couldn't wait to know. He quickened his pace and walked towards the Thunder Sword platform. On the Thunder Sword platform, there were more than 10 inner disciples practicing the Thunder Sword technique. Crackling sounds could be heard constantly, as if there were countless electric arcs jumping around. Hikeming walked up the platform and looked over. He frowned immediately. Although these junior brothers seemed to be working hard, they were lifeless and a little numb. This kind of practice didn't have any effect at all. You, come here. Coincidentally, a disciple looked at Hikeming. Hikeming pointed at him and said in a dignified tone. The disciple's body trembled. Only then did he see who it was. Immediately, his face was filled with excitement. He shouted, Senior brother you're finally back, you're finally back. These words shocked the other disciples. They stopped practicing and looked over. When they saw Hikeming, they were all excited. It was as if they had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. Senior brother you're finally back. Great, Senior brother he is finally back. Our Thunder Academy doesn't need to suffer anymore. Everyone was so excited that tears streamed down their faces. This made Hikeming even more puzzled. His frown deepened. Enough! Hikeming shouted, stunning the 10 disciples. His eyes flashed, as if there were faint purple electric arcs jumping around. He said in a dignified and domineering manner, What's going on? What happened in the month I was away? Why are you all like this? Speak. Senior brother the situation is like this. Senior brother, this is what happened. Everyone was talking at once. Shut up and speak. Hikeming once again shouted in a low voice, suppressing the crowd. Soon after, he pointed at one of them and said, Yes, Senior brother. Thus, the disciple began to recount the entire story in detail, adding in his own emotions to the story. Finally, with incomparable grief and indignation, he recounted what had happened to the disciples of the rumbling Thunder Hall. In the past, when the disciples of the Thunder Academy faced the disciples of the other academies, they would always be arrogant and domineering, trying to steal the limelight. However, things were different now. Once they became arrogant, the other party only needed to say a single word to strike them down. If you want to be arrogant, why don't you do it to Chu Mu? Originally, Wang Feng and Chu Mu had fought on the life and death sword arena. In the end, Wang Feng had died and Chu Mu had survived. Although it was shocking, in the end, what should have passed would pass. However, Because of this matter, the disciples of the rumbling thunder hall were repeatedly struck down. Who would dare to find trouble with that freak, Chumu? Who would dare to be arrogant in front of him? As a result, the disciples of the rumbling thunder hall had no choice but to keep a low profile, which was why they had become so lifeless. As a 7th-level Sword Chi realm practitioner, he killed Wang Feng, who was at the peak of 8th level on the life and death sword arena without any injuries. He Kaming's eyelids twitched, and his pupils contracted. His expression changed drastically, and he was shocked. He could not believe it. He knew Wang Feng's strength. Wang Feng was ranked 2nd in the rumbling thunder hall, just below him. Although he needed less than 10 moves to defeat Wang Feng, if it had been a life-and-death battle, it would have been more than that. Moreover, even if he could kill Wang Feng in the end, he would have suffered some injuries. Senior brother He, now that you're back, you have to uphold justice for us. You have to stand up for our rumbling thunder hall. An inner disciple shouted, and the other inner disciples echoed his words. All right, I know what to do. He Kaming shouted, and then he thought again. After a month of training, I'm already 1 step away from 9th level. In terms of cultivation, I'm above Wang Feng, and my rumbling thunder sword art is stronger than Deshang's. In terms of power, I'm stronger than Deshang's rumbling thunder sword art. If I were to have a life-and-death battle with Wang Feng, I should be able to kill Wang Feng without any injuries. He Kaming made some calculations and made a comparison. His current strength was obviously much stronger than a month ago. A month ago, he could already defeat Wang Feng in 10 moves, let alone now. This time he came back with the intention of going into seclusion for a period of time to smoothly break through to 9th level. Then he would be able to enter the main hall and become an elite disciple. He did not expect to encounter such a situation as soon as he came back. It seemed that his reputation had weakened after leaving for a month, and he had been forgotten. You guys, who is going to the High Wind courtyard to issue a challenge? I want to have a sword duel with Chumu, He Kaming said. Senior brother He, I heard that Chumu broke the sect's rules by injuring an inner disciple of the same courtyard for no reason. He was sentenced to 7 days of reflection at the fierce wind cliff. Only 3 days have passed, and today is the 4th day. Broke the sect's rules. He Kaming couldn't help but sneer. In his heart, he looked down on Chumu. It seems that this Chumu thinks he's a genius just because he defeated Wang Feng. He's so arrogant that he forgot himself. Such a person won't amount to much. Fine. After he finishes reflecting, I'll make him sober up. A worm should have its own way. Don't dream of becoming a dragon. Well said, senior brother. Let's let Chumu be arrogant for a few more days. He Kaming's words immediately raised the spirits of these 10 inner disciples. Soon, they spread the news to the entire Thunder Courtyard, High Wind Courtyard, and Blue Water Courtyard. Thus, a new round of discussion appeared. The strong wind blew like a knife, but Chumu faced it head-on. He did not move at all. His whole person was holding his sword horizontally in front of him, like an ancient statue. Immediately, he swung his sword. It seemed ordinary, but it was steady. It was not affected by the strong wind at all. It was as if the sword was swung out from a gap in the wind. I can feel the wind's attack and the wind's trajectory. Chumu closed his eyes and practiced his sword. It was not the breeze sword art, but the basic sword art. Each move was very ordinary and slow. Chumu listened to the sword and touched the sword, carefully feeling the strong wind blowing, the feeling of the sword, the hand, and the body. He did not even realize what kind of move he was using when he swung his sword. He was just following a kind of instinct. Today was the 7th morning of Chumu's reflection at the fierce wind cliff. What is wind? This question jumped into his mind once again. Wind, formless, colorless, tasteless, boundless, all-pervasive, and everywhere. That day, when I was practicing the breeze sword art at the cliff, I entered into an epiphany and comprehended the concept of wind. Today, on the 7th day of reflection at the fierce wind cliff, Facing the strong wind and looking at the wind marks on the cliff, I finally comprehended something. Chu Mu's sword's speed gradually increased. On the 100 refined sword, it was as if it was wrapped in a layer of faint airflow. Countless wind blew past from the side. Not only did it not block the sword, it seemed to increase its speed again. It was like a fish in water, like an eagle soaring in the sky. Chu Mu only felt that he seemed to have merged into this wind. Whether it was the breeze or the wind or the strong wind, he danced with the wind. His feet left the ground, swaying on the fierce wind cliff like a willow, straight to the sky, leaving behind many afterimages. After an unknown amount of time, Chu Mu woke up and landed on the ground, sheathing his sword. The blade-like strong wind also weakened at this time, turning into a strong wind that did not affect Chu Mu at all. With one epiphany, the concept of wind has reached 20%. The range of my sword chi has also increased to 3 meters, and the swinging willow wind movement technique has broken through the shackles. The current swinging willow wind movement technique is no longer a low-level movement technique, but a middle-level movement technique. It should be changed to a new name. Chu Mu said to himself. The new movement technique can more directly and easily feel the airflow, dancing with the wind like a fish swimming in water. Let's call it swimming in the wind. Chapter 48. Senior brother Chu Mu has left the fierce gale cliff and is returning to the towering wind courtyard. Yes, let's go to the towering wind courtyard. He came said and strode out of the thunder courtyard towards the towering wind courtyard. Let's go to the towering wind courtyard. Therefore, more than 20 inner disciples of the thunder courtyard followed. He came and strode towards the towering wind courtyard. 20% of the wind conception, the fierce gale cliff, is of no help to me. Chu Mu strode briskly, as if his whole body was about to float with the wind. He was very happy. With the improvement of the wind conception, he felt that the air flowing around him was wind. No matter how strong or light it was, it had a kind of intimate feeling. He couldn't help but perform the travel in the wind technique, and his whole body left the ground. After taking a few steps, he seemed to be lifted by the wind, dancing and changing with the wind. He took a full 5 or 6 meters before landing on the ground. The travel in the wind technique already had the ability to fly for a short distance. This time, after 7 days of cultivation at the fierce gale cliff, Chu Mu's progress was obvious. The wind conception has improved to 20%, but the cloud conception is less than 10%. Except for the cliffs and precipices, there seems to be no other suitable place to comprehend the cloud conception. Chu Mu walked towards the towering wind courtyard while thinking to himself, I already have the swordsmanship, body movement, and footwork. It is enough for now, but my sword chi cultivation is only at the early stage of the 7th stage. The most urgent thing is to improve the sword chi cultivation and the cloud conception. However, 20% of the wind conception should be enough to deal with all kinds of situations, so I should improve my cultivation to the 8th stage first. Chu Mu made the first choice between the cultivation and the cloud conception. If I want to improve my cultivation as soon as possible, I must have enough chi training pills. 1 chi training pill is 100 contribution points. Well, it seems that I have to go to the sword battle arena. The sword battle arena was a special platform built by the Qingfeng sword sect for the disciples of the 3 courtyards. It had a unique rule that one could obtain chi training pills. The Towering Wind sect master told Chu Mu about this. Let's go back to the pavilion to wash up and rest for a while before heading to the arena. He had been cultivating wholeheartedly for the past 7 days at Severe Gale Cliff. He did not even have time to wash up. Now he felt a little uncomfortable. However, when Chu Mu was about to arrive at the Towering Wind courtyard, he saw a large number of people gathered around the stone tablet of the Towering Wind courtyard, estimated to be as many as 50 or 60 people. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, Zhangxian noticed that there were inner disciples of the soaring wind hall, inner disciples of the rumbling thunder hall, and inner disciples of the jade water hall. While he was still in the midst of his astonishment, someone suddenly shouted, "Chu Mu is here!" In an instant, everyone turned their gazes over with sharp gazes. From the looks of it, he knew that they were looking for him. "You're Chu Mu? He doesn't seem to have 3 heads and 6 arms. He looks very ordinary." He Kaming took a few steps forward. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he hugged his sword and chuckled. There was a hint of disapproval in his tone towards Chu Mu. "May I ask how the extraordinary you have 3 heads and 6 arms?" Chu Mu asked with a faint smile. "Humph." He Kaming's expression changed slightly. "Your words are quite sharp. I hope you're not just good at talking." "Chu Mu, listen up. He is the eldest senior brother of the Rumbling Thunder Hall, He Kaming. He is the strongest person in the Rumbling Thunder Hall. Do you know what it means to be the strongest? It's not the strongest sword skill. It's the strongest sword skill and cultivation." "That's right. Wang Feng couldn't even take 10 moves from senior brother He." Immediately, 2 disciples of the Rumbling Thunder Hall jumped out and spoke to Chu Mu in an arrogant tone. "Oh, the strongest senior brother of the Rumbling Thunder Hall, what can I do for you?" Chu Mu's expression didn't change as he said indifferently, "I don't dare to say that I can teach you anything. I just heard that junior brother Chu Mu is the strongest person in the 3 halls. I feel that my sword skill is not bad, so I'm itching to have a spar with you." Although He Kaming's words sounded polite, there was a hint of arrogance in them. "Please." Chu Mu smiled faintly. Coincidentally, he was also itching to have a spar. He wanted to know how powerful the breeze sword art was with 20% of the wind mentality. It just so happened that a decent opponent was sent to him. With a clang, He Kaming pulled out his sword. The sword light shone like lightning. The disciples of the 3 halls all backed away, creating a huge empty space. "Pull out your sword." He Kaming pointed his sword at Chu Mu and said in a domineering tone. A thunder-like powerful aura spread out and assaulted Chu Mu's face. Chu Mu unhurriedly pulled out his sword. Like the wind and clouds, he was calm and composed without a single ripple. "I'll use my full power. I hope you won't disappoint me." He Kaming shouted and attacked without holding anything back. With a swing of his sword, a faint purple sword chi shot through the air. The powerful sword chi caused the grass on the ground to break and dance in the air. Chu Mu could feel the airflow caused by the sword chi. Just by casually moving his body, the faint purple sword chi almost brushed past his body. It made people gasp and sweat profusely. Then, He Kaming used the thunder light steps and turned into a beam of lightning as he approached Yi Qin. His sword pierced through the air like lightning, creating a huge cracking sound. That sword was not only fast, but also fierce. Its power was shocking. In the eyes of the crowd, it was like a flash of lightning in the dark sky, about to tear the world apart. So fast. Chu Mu was slightly surprised. This He Kaming was indeed powerful. That sword attack was even sharper and fiercer than Wang Feng's. If it were 7 days ago, Chu Mu would have found it difficult to handle. But now he was calm. His body swayed as if he was dancing in the wind. Chu Mu could easily feel the subtle airflow. Therefore, when He Kaming's powerful sword pierced towards him, Chu Mu easily dodged it. It was as if he was taking a stroll in the garden, watching the flowers bloom and fall. His clothes fluttered in the wind, giving him an indescribable elegance. No matter how fast or fierce He Kaming's sword was, it couldn't do anything to him. The spectating disciples of the 3 campuses all had their mouths wide open. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. He Kaming was on the verge of coughing out blood. The galloping thunder swordsmanship was a mid-tier sword technique that focused on speed and destructive power, executing the basic stance of the galloping thunder swordsmanship. Each sword strike was faster and more ferocious than the previous one. Not only that, the sword chi in his entire body was activated, and on the surface of his sword, A layer of faint violet sword chi danced about. However, Chu Mu was like a ghost floating under his sword. Every time he felt that he was about to stab Chu Mu would dodge by a hair's breadth. It was as if he was dancing on the tip of the sword. What kind of movement is this? It's so graceful and elegant. Senior brother Chu seems to be more powerful than 7 days ago. A sharp-eyed inner disciple of the Soaring Wind Institute said secretly, "Do you only know how to dodge?" He Kaming suddenly retracted his sword and stopped attacking. He shouted angrily with a pale face. He had used the 9 basic moves of the lightning sword art, but he couldn't even touch the corner of Chu Mu's clothes. This made him feel very depressed. "I already know your sword skills. There's no need to continue." Chu Mu said neither slowly nor quickly, "I'm going to use the middle rank sword technique, Clear Wind Sword Art's final killing move. Clear Wind Absolute Kill. You should also use your strongest killing move. One move will decide the victor. One move to determine the winner. All right, my strongest move is the final move of the mid-level lightning sword art. Lightning Break the Sky," he Kaming said, full of confidence. His galloping thunder swordsmanship was extremely powerful, and its speed was even faster. After that, the sword chi in He Kaming's entire body was mobilized, causing a layer of fine light violet arcs of lightning to emerge from his body. They crackled as they leaped about, and it caused one's scalp to go numb. This might was much greater than Wang Feng from that day. "Senior brother, he is so powerful. The power of this move must be amazing." "Senior brother, he is the strongest." He Kaming's aura shocked the disciples of the 3 academies. For a moment, they felt as if they were possessed by the thunder sword god. Then He Kaming slowly waved his sword forward. It seemed to be very fast, but in fact, it was so fast that it made people see an illusion. However, it couldn't escape from Chu Mu's gaze. Countless arcs of lightning all flew towards the 100 refined sword, transforming into a light purple sword beam that was intertwined with countless arcs of lightning. Like a bolt of lightning that ripped apart the dark sky, it descended with a destructive momentum and shot towards Chu Mu. Lightning Break the Sky. The disciples of the 3 academies trembled. They felt that their eyes couldn't bear the dazzling light, and they all squinted. Death of the Breeze. On the other hand, Chu Mu casually waved his sword. In a split second, a light cyan wind blade over a meter-long condensed and slashed out, colliding with a light purple sword beam that broke through the air. In an instant, the wind blade released an unparalleled sharpness. It actually cut the purple sword light apart and rushed towards He Kaming. Impossible. He Kaming's body trembled and his face changed. He couldn't believe that his strongest killing move was cut apart by his opponent. This was illogical. It was simply a fantasy. The wind blade was too fast and too strong. He Kaming was shocked and couldn't dodge it. He could only mobilize his sword chi and condense it in front of his chest to form a chi armor. The wind blade completely cut the purple sword light, shook off He Kaming's sword, and hit He Kaming's chest. With a bang, He Kaming groaned. The chi armor in front of his chest was broken, and the wind blade was also broken. However, the huge force sent He Kaming's body flying back a few meters. After landing, he staggered back a few steps before he could stand firm. He Kaming's face turned green, red, and white. He couldn't say a word. The disciples of the 3 academies all opened their eyes. For a moment, they couldn't react. However, when they saw the calm Chu Mu and the somewhat embarrassed He Kaming, they knew the result. However, they couldn't believe it. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu glanced at He Kaming and walked towards the Lingfeng courtyard. Everyone consciously made way for him. They looked at Chu Mu's back. They only felt that Chu Mu's back seemed to be infinitely enlarged. It contained infinite sharpness and was the best in the 3 academies. No one could compete with him. Chapter 49. Killing Wang Feng at the life and death arena and reflecting on his mistakes at Fear Scale Cliff for 7 days. Everyone was talking about Chu Mu. Now, after reflecting on his mistakes for 7 days at Fierce Gale Cliff, Chu Mu had once again shocked the 3 academies. He had easily defeated He Kaming, the #1 of Thunder Academy. With this achievement, he announced that Chu Mu was the #1 swordsman in the 3 academies. After returning to the pavilion, Li Wei was extremely happy. He washed up with warm water and changed into a clean and fresh gown. After chatting with Li Wei for a while and giving her some pointers on swordsmanship, he went to the balcony on the 2nd floor. During the 7 days of cultivation at Fierce Gale Cliff, he had completely given up on comprehending the sword momentum. Now he was revising it. Li Wei carefully cooked a sumptuous dinner. There were 2 more exquisite dishes than usual. She served them to Chu Mu. Food was the most important thing in the world. No one would dislike delicious food. Especially after a busy period, they could steal half a day of leisure to eat some delicious food and drink a cup of wine. They could watch the clouds in the sky and the ripples in the pond accompanied by a cool breeze. Chu Mu had a good rest for the night. He didn't think or practice. He just sat there quietly, watching the starry sky and chatting with Li Wei from time to time. After a good night's sleep, he woke up at dawn the next day. He was full of energy. After washing up, he began to practice the Zhongyuan sword Qi art and the sword Qi protection mystic art. During the 7 days at Fierce Gale Cliff, he increased the range of his sword Qi from 2 meters to 3 meters. The increase in range gave him more stamina and made the practice of the sword Qi protection mystic art more efficient. It was late autumn. The dew was heavy and cold. Chu Mu came to Fierce Gale Sword Arena again to practice his swordsmanship. After he finished practicing the basic swordsmanship, Han Rui came when he was about to start practicing Fierce Gale sword art. "Do you want to have a few moves?" Chu Mu asked. "No, I'm not a person who wants to be abused." Han Rui decisively refused. If their swordsmanship was similar, it would be interesting to have a fight. If the difference was too big, it would be like a child fighting with a strong man. At this time, many inner disciples appeared earlier than usual. Senior Brother Chu. "Good morning, Senior Chu. I thought that I would be the first to arrive, but I didn't expect that I wouldn't be as early as Senior Brother Chu." "How can you compare to Senior Brother Chu?" Everyone was talking at once. Chu Mu laughed. Right now, he had become the golden signboard of Towering Wind Courtyard, the pillar of support. After chatting for a while, everyone began to practice their swordsmanship. It seemed that because of Chu Mu's presence, these inner disciples were particularly hard-working in their swordsmanship. The atmosphere was very good, which made Han Rui envious. It would be great if he could have such influence one day. "Han Rui, take me to the sword battle arena," Chu Mu whispered to Han Rui. "Battle arena?" Han Rui looked at Chu Mu with a strange expression and said, "Don't tell me you want to take over the arena." Han Rui was very clear about what kind of place the sword battle arena was. It was specially built for the disciples of the 3 courtyards, or in other words, for the inner disciples of Qingfeng's sword sect between the early 7th and late 8th phase. The sword battle arena had special rules and rewards. Because it was a competition of swordsmanship, they used unsharpened swords. Moreover, they couldn't kill or seriously injure the opponent. Light injuries were nothing. There was only one sword battle arena, and whoever was on it was the arena master. According to the sect rules, if a person was the arena master for 5 days, they could get 1 Qi refining pill and 2 for 10 days. So on and so forth, they could get 6 Qi refining pills a month. However, the total number of 7th and 8th stage disciples in the 3 courtyards was close to 300. Moreover, there were also dozens of 7th and 8th stage disciples from the main palace. There was only one sword battle arena, and because they could obtain Qi refining pills, all of the 7th and 8th stage inner court disciples flocked to it like a flock of ducks. After all, a single Qi refining pill cost 100 contribution points. If one wanted to break through from the early 7th phase to the 8th phase, they would need at least 5 or 6 qi refining pills, which was 5 or 600 contribution points. They could only be obtained by doing missions for a long time. In the past, Han Rui had tried his luck in the sword battle arena. In the end, he was defeated in less than a day. Later, he was unwilling to give up and challenged another 10 or so times. However, he was never able to defend the arena for more than 2 days. Over time, he gave up on this thought and focused on cultivating. According to Han Rui's knowledge, Xiao Qianfeng, who was recognized as the strongest disciple in the Soaring Wind Courtyard, was only able to defend for 10 days and get 2 qi refining pills. At that time, Xiao Qianfeng's cultivation had only broken through to the 8th phase. After defending for 10 days, he was defeated by a peak 8th phase disciple from the main palace. After that, Xiao Qianfeng didn't enter the sword battle arena again. When he reached the peak of the 8th phase, qi refining pills had no effect on him. Now that he heard Chu Mu mention the sword battle arena, Han Rui suddenly recalled many memories. At the same time, he also thought of one thing. Although Chu Mu's cultivation was at the early 7th phase of the sword qi realm, he was able to kill the peak 8th phase Wang Feng and defeat the even stronger He Kaming. With such a terrifying sword technique, wouldn't he be able to dominate the sword battle arena? Han Rui couldn't help but think of the scene where Chu Mu swept through the sword battle arena and became the arena master, directly dominating the sword battle arena until he didn't want to be the arena master anymore. Han Rui didn't think that in the entire Azure Edge sword sect there was anyone under the 9th phase who could defeat Chu Mu. "Let's go. I'll take you to the sword battle arena," Han Rui suddenly said, because he really wanted to know if Chu Mu could dominate the sword battle arena for a long time. According to his estimation, Chu Mu was currently at the early 7th phase. If he wanted to break through to the 8th phase, he would need 5 or 6 qi refining pills. That would be dominating the sword battle arena for a month. After that, if he wanted to go from the early 8th phase to the peak of the 8th phase, he would need at least double the amount of qi refining pills. It seemed that in the history of the Azure Edge sword sect, there had never been anyone who occupied the sword battle arena for 3 months, not even a month. Chu Mu didn't know what Han Rui was thinking. He sheathed his sword and left the Soaring Wind sword arena with Han Rui. He left the Soaring Wind courtyard and went to the sword battle arena. On one side, Han Rui explained to Chu Mu about the sword battle arena and the sword battle steel, as well as the people who had left their names on the steel and their achievements. The sword battle arena was some distance away from the 3 courtyards. It occupied a large area and could accommodate more than 1,000 people at the same time. In the middle, there was a 1/2 meter tall stone platform about 10 meters long and 10 meters wide. Next to it, there was a small pavilion where the administrator of the sword battle arena usually rested. Chun Jin was 36 years old this year, and his cultivation was at the early 10th stage of the sword qi realm. He was one of the deacons of the sword faction, and was assigned to manage the sword battle arena by the sword faction. Now he was sitting not far from the sword battle arena, watching 2 disciples compete in sword techniques. After watching for a while, he felt that it was boring. He looked at a stone stele that was like a sword pointing to the sky. There were 3 big red words on it: sword battle steel. On the sword battle steel, there were more than a dozen small bronze swords that were a little longer than a thumb. There were words engraved on them. These small bronze swords were arranged from top to bottom. It has been a long time since a disciple was able to leave their name on the sword battle steel. Chun Jin sighed inwardly. Then he looked at the disciple who had defeated another challenger on the sword battle arena. The 5th day. I hope he can become the next disciple qualified to leave his name on the sword battle steel. Chapter 50. You are not my opponent, go down. Yu Ying's eyes were sharp as he looked at the person opposite him. He slightly shook his head and said disapprovingly, "We haven't even fought yet. How do you know that I am not your opponent?" The person who heard Yu Ying's words showed an angry expression. He waved his sword a few times and said angrily, "It seems that if I don't make a move, you will not give up. Ying sighed. His expression became arrogant. With a swoosh, he drew a flower with his sword and said, "Make your move. I will let you know the difference between the disciples of the main palace and the disciples of the 3 academies." The disciple was angry when he heard Yu Ying's words. His expression did not change. He attacked first. His sword was extremely fast. The sword light flashed, and all of them pierced towards Yu Ying. Yu Ying smiled and casually waved his sword. With only one sword, he broke a dozen of his opponent's sword. The sword light rotated and moved his opponent's sword to the side. He then pushed his sword forward, and the tip of his sword was pressed against his opponent's throat. "You lost." Yu Ying seemed to be regretful. It was as if he wanted to lose but couldn't. As expected, the disciples of the 3 courtyards can't be compared with the disciples of the main palace. This Yu Ying really has some skills, Qin Jin said to himself. He is only at the middle of the 8th phase, but he has defeated so many 8th phase inner disciples. It is already late. In another quarter of an hour, the 5 days will be up. I hope that he can continue for another 5 days and become the next disciple qualified to leave his name on the battle sword tablet. In other words, Qin Jin already believed that Yu Ying would win. In the remaining quarter of an hour, no one could be his opponent. After all, disciples at the peak of the 8th phase would not come here because they did not need qi refining pills. Moreover, there was a rule that disciples at the peak of the 8th phase were not allowed to enter the battle sword stage, who said that the disciples of the 3 courtyards are not as good as the disciples of the main palace. If you think that you are strong, then go and challenge Chu Mu of the Soaring Wind Courtyard. The disciple who was defeated by Yu Ying was a middle of the 8th phase inner disciple of the Thunder Courtyard. He refused to accept the result. Is Chu Mu from the High Wind Department the new inner disciple, who is known as the best swordsman in the 3 departments? Hearing this, Yu Ying smiled again and said proudly, "You can call him over now. I'll wait for him here. I'm just afraid that he doesn't have the guts to come." At this time, Chu Mu and Han Rui happened to be approaching the sword battle arena. Both Chu Mu and Han Rui heard these words. Han Rui looked at Chu Mu with a strange expression, and then looked at Yu Ying on the stage. He secretly felt sorry for Yu Ying. Han Rui didn't think that Yu Ying would be a match for Chu Mu. Chu Mu is here. The inner disciple of the Thunder Courtyard, who was angrily about to leave the stage, saw Chu Mu, and his eyes lit up. Yu Ying immediately looked at him and said, "You are Chu Mu. I heard that you are the best swordsman in the 3 courtyards. Come and fight with me. Let me give you some pointers. It will be easier for you to join the main palace in the future." Yu Ying's arrogant words made the disciples of the 3 courtyards angry. Even Han Rui was very unhappy. The disciples of the main palace in the Qingfeng sword sect had always thought that they were the orthodox disciples of the sect and were superior to the disciples of the 3 courtyards. Therefore, from time to time, they would praise themselves and belittle the disciples of the 3 courtyards. Because of this, there were many conflicts. However, the disciples of the 3 courtyards were always at a disadvantage, which encouraged the disciples of the main palace to be arrogant. "Senior brother Chu, teach him a lesson. Let him know that he is the best swordsman in the 3 courtyards." "Senior brother Chu, I support you." "Senior brother Chu, let him have a taste of your sword." "Senior brother Chu, this sword is for you." Someone even brought Chu Mu an unsharpened sword of 100 refinements. After Chu Mu took it, he handed his sword to Han Rui and asked him to hold it for the time being. Then he tapped his foot lightly and leaped into the air like a big bird. He landed on the stage with a calm and elegant posture, which made the crowd gasp in surprise. His body movement is not bad. Yu Ying was slightly surprised. This disciple called Chu Mu has a good body movement. Qin Jin's eyes suddenly lit up. He has been in the limelight recently. I wonder how his swordsmanship is. He seemed to be looking forward to it. Make your move. I'll let you know that even if you're the #1 disciple of the 3 campuses, There's still a huge gap between you and us from the main hall. Yu Ying flicked his wrist, and a sword flower appeared. Chu Mu did not say a word. He looked indifferent and did not refuse. Only Han Rui was laughing in his heart, letting Chu Mu make the first move. Yu Ying was simply courting death. However, the disciples of the main palace had always been arrogant. It was good to let him suffer a little. The snow-white sword light was like a rainbow and a cool breeze. Chen Jin's pupils shrank instantly. He was at the early 10th phase and had a certain level of attainment in swordsmanship. He could tell at a glance that this sword was not ordinary. He was shocked. Yu Ying's expression suddenly changed. He felt that although the sword was not fast and was very ordinary, as if it was just a casual stab, it gave him a feeling that he could not dodge it. It was as if no matter where he dodged or how he reacted, it would affect his entire body. Yu Ying clenched his teeth and quickly stabbed out with his sword. He wanted to use his powerful sword chi and fast swordsmanship to defeat Chu Mu's sword. However, when the two swords collided, Yu Ying only felt that the power of his sword disappeared like a stone sinking into the sea. He did not have time to be surprised. He only felt that his sword was pulled by a gentle force and uncontrollably moved to one side. A snow-white light quickly enlarged in front of his eyes. He did not even have time to react before the tip of the sword was pressed against his throat. "You are too weak," Chu Mu said indifferently and withdrew his sword. Yu Ying's expression changed. He was blue, then red, then white. He was arrogant and arrogant, but in the end he was defeated by a sword. This huge difference made Yu Ying unable to accept it. He only felt a mouthful of blood rush up and stuck in his throat. He could not move forward or backward. "Brother Chu, good job." The swordsmanship of the disciples of the main palace is only SO. Haha, you are only 15 minutes away from the end of the 5 days. Who told you to shamelessly challenge Brother Chu? Now you know how powerful I am. Regret it. Hearing this, Yu Ying could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale and his cheeks became unhealthily red. He glared at Chu Mu fiercely and glanced at the crowd. Then he raised his chi and flew away. His back was a little embarrassed. Chu Mu felt that this disciple of the main palace would not let him go so easily. Chu Mu's swordsmanship is very powerful. Chen Jin gasped. Perhaps if he used his full strength, he could defeat or even kill Chu Mu. However, that was because his sword chi cultivation was many times higher than Chu Mu's. If he ignored his sword chi cultivation and only focused on swordsmanship, he felt that he would not be able to take more than 10 moves from Chu Mu. What a pity. Yu Ying is only 15 minutes away from the end of the 5 days. He will be able to get a chi training pill. But I think Brother Chu is not suitable for being the best swordsman of the 3 campuses. Being the best swordsman of the Qingfeng sword sect is more suitable for Brother Chu. A disciple of the 3 campuses said, "Yeah, I think that makes sense too." Chu Mu did not care about these comments. Whether it was the best swordsman of the 3 campuses or the best swordsman of the Qingfeng sword sect, Chu Mu did not care. He would not accept or reject it. It was all up to him. "Who wants to fight with me?" Chu Mu said softly. His voice entered everyone's ears. Instantly, the entire place fell silent. Everyone looked at each other. They were all clear that they probably couldn't withstand a single strike from Chu Mu, and they weren't willing to go up and embarrass themselves. "Haha, let me fight with you, Brother Chu." A disciple flew onto the fighting sword stage and saluted Chu Mu with his sword. Although I know that I'm not Senior Brother's match, being able to fight Senior Brother and experience Senior Brother's unfathomable sword techniques will definitely be of help to me. This disciple's words immediately made the other disciples' eyes light up. They felt that it was very reasonable. Yes, although he was not a match for Chu Mu, wasn't it a form of learning from a swordsman like Chu Mu? Chapter 51. Please enlighten me, Senior Apprentice Brother Chu Mu. said a middle stage, 8th stage inner disciple as he respectfully saluted Chu-Mu. He couldn't even remember how many times he had challenged Chu-Mu in the past 30 days. In short, every time he challenged Chu-Mu, he was defeated by Chu-Mu in a single strike. Even so, he could clearly feel that his sword technique had improved in the past 20 days. Chu-Mu nodded. He had a bit of appreciation for this person. In fact, someone like him who persevered and was able to keep fighting despite repeated defeats. Chu-Mu was certain that such a person would be able to achieve great things in the future. As for some people, after being defeated by his sword several times, they would lose the courage to go on stage. Below the stage, many disciples from the 3 halls and the main hall had complicated expressions. They couldn't find any words to express the admiration and respect they felt for this inner disciple who had been on the stage for 30 days. They could only look up to a tall mountain. Many female disciples didn't hide their admiration at all. From time to time, they would throw coquettish glances at Chu-Mu. This Chu-Mu. Attendant Chun Jin's face was solemn as he thought to himself, after today he'll be on the stage for 30 days. Since the founding of the Azure Edge Sword Sect, the longest time a disciple has been on the stage is 30 days. Is there going to be another disciple who can break this record? Moreover, if we don't talk about time and instead talk about the number of sword fights, Chu-Mu has already far surpassed the previous stage defenders. 1,000 consecutive victories. Chen Jin was incomparably shocked. He was the attendant of the sword battle arena, and he was here every day to watch Chu-Mu accept challenges from one disciple after another. Every disciple wasn't a match for Chu-Mu's sword. One after another, they would come up. Unknowingly, in the past 30 days, Chu-Mu had already fought and won 1,000 battles. Thinking of this, Chen Jin felt a bit dizzy. It was as if he was too tired from practicing the sword and couldn't see anything real. Thank you for your guidance, Senior Brother Chu. Although this disciple of the Blue Water Academy had been defeated by Chu-Mu in a single strike, he didn't look dejected in the slightest. Instead, he excitedly saluted Chu-Mu. I feel like I've reached a bottleneck in my swordsmanship, but thanks to Senior Brother Chu's guidance, I've been able to comprehend something. I should be able to break through in a few days. At that time, I'll come back to ask Senior Brother for guidance. Now, whether it was the disciples of the 3 academies or the main hall, whether they were at 7th or 8th level, as long as they had fought against Chu-Mu and watched Chu-Mu's sword fights many times, they were all convinced that Chu-Mu was Senior Brother. In their eyes, Chu-Mu was already the undisputed #1 disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect in terms of swordsmanship. At this time, the sky was getting dark. Once the sun set, Chu-Mu would be considered to have finished guarding the sword platform. After 30 days, he would be able to obtain the 6th Qi refining pill. Chu-Mu had already consumed and digested the 5 Qi cultivating pills he had previously obtained. Adding on a month of bitter training, his sword aura cultivation had increased from the early 7th phase to the late 7th phase, nearing the peak. If he had another Qi refining pill, Chu-Mu would be able to reach the peak of 7th level. To Chu-Mu, obtaining the 6th Qi refining pill wasn't difficult at all. At this time, 2 people quickly flew over from the distance. One was dressed in blue, and the other in white. Their robes fluttered in the wind, making them seem like immortals. It's Senior Sister Luo. Senior Sister Luo is here. The disciples of the main hall were all excited when they saw her. Their eyes were filled with deep admiration. The disciples of the 3 academies were also attracted. Immediately, the male disciples were stunned. Some of the female disciples were ashamed of their inferiority, while others were jealous. Chu-Mu looked over. Even with his willpower and temperament, he couldn't help but be stunned. This woman's appearance was something that Chu-Mu had never seen in the past few decades. Only some of the modified beauties on the internet could compare. However, those beauties were fake after all. They lacked vitality and couldn't be compared to the real person. Her face was very delicate. Her skin was delicate and white like cream. When her facial features were pieced together, Not only did she have a stunning beauty, but she also had a heroic spirit that made people's eyes light up. As the female disciple approached, a feminine fragrance wafted over. The female disciple didn't stop. When she approached the sword platform, she leaped over everyone's heads like a swallow returning to its nest. She shuttled back and forth, and a mesmerizing fragrance wafted over. She gently and steadily landed on the battle arena, displaying her top-notch movement skills. The male disciple behind him shot out like an arrow from a bow. As he approached the arena, he made a sharp turn and landed steadily at the edge of the arena. He was like a long spear, his aura sharp and threatening. Good movement technique. It's at least a mid-level movement technique. Chumu's eyes flashed as he thought to himself, "You're Chumu. It's said that you're the best swordsman in the 3 academies. You even claim to be the best swordsman in the Qingfeng sword sect." The female disciple's full red lips parted slightly. Her voice was crisp and gentle. Even if it was a stern question, it was still pleasant to the ears. It was intoxicating. Looking at the male disciples of the 3 academies and the main hall, most of them were intoxicated. They couldn't wait to hear the words being said to them. "Tell me your name," Chumu said faintly. He had long known that the so-called first place would bring him some trouble. However, this kind of thing couldn't be clarified. The more one tried to clarify it, the worse it would be. It would make others think that he was a hypocrite who didn't dare to admit it. Therefore, Chumu's attitude had always been to neither admit nor deny it. They could say whatever they wanted. Chumu's words and tone were like he was talking to a normal challenger. This caused the disciples of the 3 academies and the main palace to all reveal shocked expressions. They couldn't describe what they were feeling. It seemed that they worshipped Chumu even more. Facing a goddess like Senior Sister Luo, he could still be so calm. However, they also felt a little depressed. They felt very uncomfortable that Senior Sister Luo, who was like a goddess in their hearts, was treated so coldly by Chumu. The female disciples all revealed expressions of adoration. Their adoration for Chumu was as hot as fire. As for the cold and threatening male disciple on the side of the stage, his eyebrows were tightly furrowed as a sliver of unhappiness flashed across his face. "I'm Luo Yuling, a disciple of the main hall." The female disciple's attitude towards Chumu was clearly very surprised. All the male disciples she met, after seeing her, would either shamelessly greet her, pretend to be indifferent and ignore her to attract her attention, or use various methods to get close to her, etc. However, the indifference of the person in front of her made her feel that it was not an act. It was a kind of natural instinct that came from the bottom of his heart. Because of this, Luo Yuling was angry that he dared to ignore her. Her voice became colder and colder, and there was a trace of arrogance in it. "I'm known as the best swordsman among the disciples of the main hall. You're known as the best swordsman among the disciples of the 3 academies. Today, I'll show you that the 3 academies are inferior to the disciples of the main hall. Even though you're the best swordsman, you're still no match for me." Hearing this, Chumu was a little surprised. The best swordsman among the disciples of the main hall? If it was true, then this female disciple's swordsmanship must be quite accomplished. Inevitably, Chumu was a little expectant. Incomparable respect and admiration appeared in the eyes of the male disciples below. However, Chumu did not see that when the male disciple at the edge of the platform heard that Luo Yuling claimed to be the best swordsman among the disciples of the main hall, a strange look flashed across his face. The disciples below were both expectant and conflicted. On one hand, they hoped to see their goddess display her invincible power and defeat Chumu. On the other hand, they did not want Chumu to be defeated. On the other hand, they did not want Chumu to win. They thought that it would be better to have a draw. On the other hand, they wished that they could replace Chumu and fight Luo Yuling. Even if they were defeated and injured in the end, they would be willing to do so. Chapter 52. The disciples of the main palace had always been more outstanding than the disciples of the 3 courtyards. This had been proven many times. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to become the number 1 disciple of the main palace. Think about it, the main palace's faction was the same as the 3 academies. They had 7th and 8th phase disciples, and even 9th phase elite disciples. Most of these elite disciples were promoted from the 3 academies, and each one of them had extraordinary sword skills. To be able to stand out among the inner disciples and elite disciples and become the number 1 in sword skills, her sword skills must be very profound. She was definitely above all the disciples of the 3 courtyards except for Chu-Mu. Chu-Mu couldn't help but look forward to it. I have cultivated the intermediate level sword skill, Rainstorm Sword Art. Next, I will use the Rainstorm Sword Art to defeat you. I will let you know that being the number 1 disciple of the sword faction is just a fantasy for you. The 3 courtyards will always be inferior to our main palace. Luo Yuling shouted. With a clang, she pulled out the unsharpened 100 refined sword she had just received and pointed it at Chu-Mu. The sword aura was swift and fierce, surging like a storm towards Chu-Mu. No matter how strong you are, I will not move. Luo Yuling saw that Chu-Mu wasn't affected in the slightest. She let out a cold shout and drew her sword. Each strike was incomparably fast. Sword shadows crisscrossed like a storm, enveloping Chu-Mu's entire body. Sister Luo's sword skills are so high. Yeah, I heard that Sister Luo's Rainstorm Sword Art has already reached Desheng's level. Once she uses it, her sword will not stop like a storm. It is so dense that no one can dodge it. I can't even withstand one attack from such a dense attack. She is indeed the number 1 disciple of the main palace. I wonder how Brother Chu will deal with it. Chu-Mu's eyebrows creased slightly. He felt the storm of swords charging towards him and felt the flow of air within. His body naturally reacted and he used wind travel. He was like a fallen leaf in a violent storm, dancing left and right. What an exquisite movement technique! Chun Jin and Wanren Yun both revealed a wisp of surprise as they spoke in their hearts. Luo Yuling gritted her teeth, and her sword energy surged. She didn't hold back her late-stage 8th phase sword energy. Her sword speed became faster, and the sword shadows became denser. Every sword seemed to tear through the air, creating a chi-chi sound. The sword seemed to have disappeared. Between heaven and earth, there was only a torrential downpour that enveloped Chu-Mu. Chu-Mu's figure changed, faster and faster, but he didn't lose his composure. Somewhat disappointed, Chu-Mu said softly, "If you are the number 1 swordsman among the disciples of the main palace, I can only say that the swordsmanship of the disciples of the main palace is too weak." Chu-Mu's words almost made Luo Yuling vomit blood. This was the first time someone had dared to say such things to her. She secretly hardened her heart and stopped her sword. In a split second, all the sword shadows exploded in the midst of the sword light, transforming into raindrops that surrounded Chu-Mu from all directions and rushed towards him. Torrential slaughter! He executed the strongest killing move of the Rainstorm swordsmanship in anger. Chu-Mu had nowhere to dodge. The disciples below the sword platform were shocked and held their breaths. Wan Ranyin sneered and looked at Chu-Mu with pity. Even if he didn't die after being hit by this killing move, he would be seriously injured. However, even if he died, so what? He was just an inner disciple of the 3 houses. Chu-Mu's figure paused, and he casually slashed out with his sword. White clouds rotated and exploded. Sword chi cut, collided, and cancelled each other out. It was the shocking cloud slaughter. Luo Yuling looked as if she had seen a ghost. She couldn't believe that the torrential slaughter she was so proud of was broken just like that. Wenren Yin was also surprised. "If this is your swordsmanship, then there is no need to continue. You can go down," Chu-Mu said. "Do you think you can make me admit defeat by blocking one of my killing moves?" Luo Yuling was filled with hatred. She shouted, "Take this!" As soon as he finished speaking, the sword light flickered and the sword shadows turned into a torrential rain. Chu Mu faintly shook his head and casually swung his sword. With a turn of the sword and a thrust, the torrential rain dissipated. Chu Mu's sword was pressed against Luo Yuling's throat. Luo Yuling's beautiful eyes widened, filled with disbelief and shock. "I'm afraid your so-called #1 swordsmanship among the main palace disciples was given to you by someone else," Chu Mu said indifferently and sheathed his sword. When Luo Yuling heard this, her heart was filled with grievance. She angrily harumphed and threw the 100 refined sword to the side. She flew up and, without looking back, flew out of the sword fighting platform. She quickly left. Chu Mu saw a drop of tear fall on the edge of the sword fighting platform. Junior sister, junior sister. Wenren Yin turned pale with fright and hurriedly shouted. However, Luo Yuling ignored her and left without looking back. Chu Mu looked at the 100 refined sword that was thrown to the side and frowned slightly. The concept of a swordsman was that the sword was a loyal companion. Although it might not be loyal to the end, unless forced to, it would not be taken the initiative to throw it away. But Luo Yuling's current actions caused Chu Mu's impression of her to drop by 3 points. A swordsman was like a swordsman. The sword was a companion. Abandoning the sword just because of a defeat, such a person was not worthy of being called a swordsman. Chu Mu, you actually let junior sister Luo suffer grievances. Wenren Yun angrily rushed towards Chu Mu and flew onto the arena. His face was cold and sinister, and his eyes revealed a fierce light. "Do you know that we usually hold her in the palm of our hands and carefully protect her, not letting her feel the slightest bit wronged? But today, not only did you make her feel wronged, you even made her cry. I will absolutely not forgive you." As he spoke, a fierce killing intent swept out from Wenren Yun's body, and a powerful sword qi cultivation was revealed. The sword qi moved horizontally and vertically, wreaking havoc on the sword discourse arena. It was incomparably powerful. Chu Mu's expression changed slightly as he became vigilant. What a powerful sword qi cultivation! It has already surpassed the 8th stage. Chu Mu thought, that's right, Wenren Yun's sword qi cultivation was at the middle stage of the 9th stage. The expressions of the disciples below the stage changed drastically as they hurriedly retreated. With a clang, Wenren Yun drew his sword. The 100 refined sword was filled with killing intent as it pounced towards Chu Mu. A bloody and fierce aura assaulted him. "I'll give you a chance. I'll bring junior sister Luo over. You must kowtow to junior sister Luo and admit your wrongs." Wenren Yun's voice was incomparably cold. "Otherwise, I'll let you know that no matter how brilliant your sword arts are, no matter how enormous the difference in sword qi cultivation is, you're just an ant in front of it. Of course, you can rest assured that I won't kill you, but I'll cut off the tendons in your hands so that you'll never be able to practice the sword again. You think too highly of yourself," Chu Mu said without fear. The peak of the 8th stage was already not his match. Chu Mu had never fought a 9th stage sword cultivator before. At this moment, his heart was boiling with excitement. The sword in his hand was trembling, and his battle intent was bursting forth. Facing Wenren Yun's powerful aura, Chu Mu's mind was highly concentrated. The edge of the sword appeared, and he pressed forward courageously without fear. Faintly, Chu Mu felt that he was about to enter the state he was in when he faced Wang Feng in the outer sect, Sword Force. "Wenren Yun, you're too presumptuous. Could it be that you want to violate the sect's rules?" An explosive shout resounded, making people's ears buzz and dizzy. A figure shot over like a sharp sword and landed beside Chu Mu. It was the deacon Qinjin. He stared at Wenren Yun with a stern expression and dispersed Wenren Yun's fierce aura. "Deacon Qin, I advise you to stay out of this matter." Wenren Yun's face sank. "Stay out of this matter?" Qinjin sneered. I'm the deacon of the sword battle arena. Everything in the sword battle arena is under my control. Even the headmaster can't violate the rules of the sword battle arena. You're just an elite disciple of the main palace, and you want to challenge the sex rules? Moreover, as an elite disciple of the main palace, you actually have to attack a disciple of one of the 3 intersections. Could it be that you don't feel ashamed? Good. Using the sex rules to pressure me? Indeed, I don't dare to violate the sex rules. Wenren was so angry that he laughed. He sheathed his sword and looked from Chun Jin's face to Chu Mu's. His killing intent was hidden deep within. He said in a threatening tone, "Dealing with you is indeed beneath my status. I'll wait for you in the main palace. When you become an elite disciple of the main palace, I'll personally teach you what to pay attention to as a new elite disciple. Of course, if you can't become an elite disciple, then you're just a piece of trash. You don't even have the qualifications to be remembered by me." As she spoke, Wenren tapped the ground, and then she flashed out like an arrow that had left the bow. Chapter 53. While Chu Mu was dominating the arena, the 3 courtyards were in a storm. The swordsmanship of the inner disciple of Qing Feng sword sect is only so. I'm really disappointed. Elder Yao Ri shook his head. Disappointment was written all over his old face. This was the grassland outside the steel of the Soaring Wind courtyard. Many people were gathered there, including the disciples of the Thunder courtyard, the Blue Water courtyard, and the Soaring Wind courtyard. In addition, an elder of the Soaring Wind courtyard was among them. Hearing Elder Yao Ri's words, the disciples of the 3 courtyards and Elder Lin of Lingfeng courtyard revealed an angry expression. Elder is right. We have already swept through Jade Water courtyard and Thunder courtyard. Now we will sweep through Lingfeng courtyard. Su Qilai echoed with a smile. I believe that under Elder's leadership, Senior Brother Hualong will be able to sweep through all the disciples of Lingfeng courtyard and point his sword at Qingfeng main palace. Su Hualong stood in the open space with the 100 refined sword in his hand. His face was indifferent, but there was a trace of arrogance in his eyes. His eyes were filled with disdain when he glanced at the disciples of the 3 courtyards of Qingfeng sword sect. After a month, Su Hualong, who lost under Chu Mu's sword, not only broke through to the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm, under Elder Glorious Sun's wholehearted nurturing, he took a huge step forward and reached the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. Moreover, under Elder Yao Ri's guidance and his own talent, his swordsmanship attainment had improved significantly. After losing his beloved disciple, Elder Yao Ri took Su Hualong's talent in swordsmanship as his last disciple and nurtured him wholeheartedly. Out of a sense of superiority, Elder Yao Ri brought Su Hualong to Qingshui sword sect. After sweeping through all the level 7 and level 8 inner disciples of Qingshui sword sect, he came to Qingfeng sword sect and swept through almost all the level 7 and level 8 inner disciples of Jade Water courtyard and Thunder courtyard. He was about to sweep through Lingfeng courtyard. Damn it! If Senior Brother He Kaming was still in our Thunder Sound Academy, he would definitely not allow Su Hualong to be so arrogant. He would definitely be able to defeat Su Hualong. An inner disciple of Thunder Sound Academy clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. That's right. Unfortunately, Brother He Kaming broke through to 9th stage half a month ago and has become an elite disciple of the main hall. Otherwise, this Qinglan disciple wouldn't have the chance to be arrogant here. Who else has the guts to fight me? Su Hualong's eyes, which were as sharp as swords, carried a hint of arrogance as he slowly swept his gaze across the faces of the inner disciples of the 3 academies. His gaze was so sharp that the disciples of the 3 academies did not dare to look him in the eye. Haha, Senior Brother Hualong, the disciples of the 3 academies of Qingfeng sword sect are all trash. They don't even have the guts to look you in the eye, let alone fight you. Such disciples wouldn't even be qualified to sweep the floor in our sect. Su Qilai laughed and continued to attack the disciples of the 3 academies of Qingfeng sword sect with his words. Elder Yao Ri's face was indifferent as he stood aside and smiled without saying a word. The disciples of the 3 academies were once again enraged. One by one they looked at Su Qilai. Their eyes were as sharp as swords, full of anger, as if they were going to shoot Su Qilai to death. Su Qilai was shocked and subconsciously took a step back. Immediately aware of his own actions, Su Qilai's face flushed red and he became angry. He shouted, "What are you looking at? I'm talking to you. If you have the ability, draw your sword and fight with Senior Brother Hualong. If you don't have the ability, then get lost and obediently be trash." Elder Yao Ri, the words of this disciple of your sect are too extreme. Elder Lin's face was dark as he said in a low voice, "It's inevitable for a young man to be impulsive." Elder Yao Ri was secretly happy, but on the surface he was very indifferent. "Moreover, it's just a few words. It's not a big deal. Moreover, what he said is mostly the truth. This kind of disciple will not use flowery words to deceive others. He is more worthy of encouragement. The conduct of a disciple is related to the reputation of the sword faction. What do you think, Elder Lin?" Elder Yao Ri's words twisted the truth and made Elder Lin tremble in anger. The disciples of the 3 academies were even more furious. Li Yang was among the crowd. However, he was just an ordinary member now. After seeing Su Hualong's sword technique, he knew that the gap between him and Su Hualong was getting bigger and bigger. A middle stage, 8th stage disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard pulled out his sword and strode forward. He pointed his sword at Su Hualong and said, "Take my sword. Not to mention 1 sword, I'll take 10 or 100 swords. I'm just afraid that you don't have the ability." Su Hualong said proudly, looking at the sharp sword that was thrusting towards him. A trace of contempt flashed across his eyes. He moved his head and dodged the sword. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The middle stage, 8th stage disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard attacked faster than the previous. It was the basic move of the Soaring Wind sword technique. However, Su Hualong was able to dodge easily, causing the disciple's sword to hit empty air. Is this the sword technique of the inner disciples of the Soaring Wind Courtyard? It's really disappointing. Su Hualong dodged the sword once again and said faintly, "Take my sword too." After saying that, he attacked with his sword. A bright sword light flashed across the sky like a rainbow. With a clang, the opponent's sword was pushed away and the sword was thrust forward, stopping at the disciple's throat. Ever since he was defeated by Chu Mu's sword, Su Hualong subconsciously liked to do this. I've said that I'll sweep through the 3 inner courtyards of the Qingfeng sword sect. I, Su Hualong, am a man of my words. Su Hualong sheathed his sword and said proudly. The expression of the inner disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard changed from green to red to white. Don't be complacent. When Senior Brother Chu returns, you'll know what failure is. The disciple snorted coldly. That's right. When Senior Brother Chu returns, you'll know that your sword technique is nothing. Immediately, another disciple of the 3 courtyards echoed. That's right. He's not a match for Senior Brother Chu. Even Senior Brother, he couldn't defeat Senior Brother Chu. Where did Senior Brother Chu go? Who knows? Hurry up and find Senior Brother Chu. I heard that Senior Brother Chu went to the sword battle arena. Hurry up and find him. Su Hualong's eyes flashed with a trace of gloominess. The word Senior Brother Chu gave him a very uncomfortable feeling. More than a month ago, when he swept through the outer courtyard of the Qingfeng sword sect, he was disrupted by a person with the surname Chu. Moreover, Chu Mu defeated him with a single sword. Su Hualong would wake up from his dreams almost every day because Chu Mu's sword had left a shadow in his heart. This time, other than sweeping through the 3 courtyards, his other purpose in coming to the Qingfeng sword sect was to wipe away his shame and defeat Chu Mu. My current cultivation is at the early stage of the 8th stage of the Sword Chi realm. My sword technique has obviously improved a lot compared to a month ago. I can even fight against someone at the late stage of the 8th stage of the Sword Chi realm. Su Hualong said to himself. As for Chu Mu, his cultivation was not even at the peak of the 6th stage a month ago. After more than a month, he's at most at the 7th stage. The gap between the 7th and 8th stage is huge. He's not a match for me. Hearing the words of the crowd, Elder Lin's eyes lit up. He had a deep impression of Chu Mu. Elder Yao Ri, since you've brought your newly recruited disciple to challenge our Qingfeng sword sect and declare that you're going to sweep through the 3 courtyards of our sect, do you dare to make a bet with me? Elder Lin thought for a moment and said in an arrogant tone, If you don't dare, take your disciple and scram now. From now on, don't step into our Qingfeng sword sect. Why wouldn't I dare? Elder Yao Ri couldn't stand being provoked. He glared at Elder Lin, and a scorching heat spread out from his body like the sun. All right, Elder Lin laughed. Your disciple's swordsmanship is indeed good. I admit that none of the disciples here are a match for him. However, there's a disciple in our courtyard who can defeat your disciple. Do you believe it? Oh ha! There's a disciple in the Soaring Wind courtyard who can defeat my disciple. Call him out and let me broaden my horizons. Elder Yao Ri naturally didn't believe it, and there was a hint of contempt in his tone. Su Hualong felt increasingly uncomfortable, while Su Qilai fell into deep thought. Very well. Since Elder Yao Ri is so confident, let's wait for a while. Elder Lin laughed and pointed at the 2 disciples beside him. You too, go to the battle arena and bring Chu Mu here. Yes, Elder. The 2 disciples were unusually excited. They channeled their sword chi into their feet and executed their movement skills. They quickly ran towards the battle arena, leaving behind a trail of dust. Elder, Su Qilai suddenly called out in a low voice. Only he and Elder Yao Ri could hear it. What's the matter? Elder Yao Ri frowned slightly and looked at Su Qilai. Elder, it's like this. Su Qilai said, more than a month ago, when Senior Hualong was still an outer disciple, he challenged Qingshui sword sect's outer disciple and Qingfeng sword sect's outer disciple. It was about to end, but in the end, an outer disciple named Chu Mu appeared and defeated Senior Hualong with a single stroke. Therefore, Senior Hualong followed you to challenge the 3 courtyards of Qingfeng sword sect with the intention of looking for Chu Mu to avenge his humiliation. Hualong was defeated by a single stroke more than a month ago. Elder Yao Ri found it unbelievable. Soon after, he nodded confidently. That was more than a month ago. In the past month, under my guidance and Hualong's extraordinary talent in swordsmanship, his attainment in swordsmanship has improved by leaps and bounds. It's good that Chu Mu doesn't come. Once he comes, he will be defeated by Hualong's swordsmanship and will never be able to turn the tables. Elder is right. Su Qilai's doubts completely disappeared. Elder Yao Ri, since we want to bet, there must be a wager. Elder Lin continued to smile as if victory was already in his hands. I bet that Chu Mu will defeat Su Hualong. If you lose, not only will you have to take back your words, you will also have to apologize to us with a sword salute. It was extremely difficult for an unreasonable person like Elder Yao Ri to apologize with a sword salute, especially when the target of the apology was not only Elder Lin, but also the other disciples. It was even more impossible. All right, I bet that Su Hualong will defeat Chu Mu. If you lose, you will admit that the 3 courtyards of Qingfeng sword sect are all trash. Elder Yao Ri was very confident in himself and Su Hualong. All right. Elder Lin was even more confident in Chu Mu. The wager was established. The disciples were extremely excited and looked forward to it. Chapter 54. The sun set in the west, leaving a touch of red on the horizon. The sky gradually darkened, and large gusts of cold wind blew, causing people's black hair to dance and their clothes to flutter. Congratulations, Chu Mu. You've created a record that can be considered impossible. Chun Jin's eyes flickered as he stared at Chu. He smiled from the bottom of his heart. You are the second disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect to guard the sword platform for 30 days. You are qualified to leave your name at the top of the battle sword tablet. This is an honor that belongs to you. Who was the first? Chu was not very excited. He asked indifferently. It was Patriarch Luo Qinglin. Qin Jin said with a face full of admiration and longing. He was extremely excited. Chu nodded. He did not have any impression of Luo Qinglin. After all, he was the patriarch. He did not know how many years ago. Chu's indifference made Qin Jin unable to vent his excitement. He had no target. In the end, he resentfully took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Chu. This is what you deserve. Qin Jin threw the porcelain bottle to Chu and spoke in a slightly unhappy tone. Chu smiled and took the porcelain bottle. Inside was a qi cultivating pill. He turned around and left a sentence. I won't be coming back tomorrow. Not coming tomorrow? Then you have given up on the sword platform. Qin Jin looked at Chu's back and repeated to himself. He looked a little regretful. What a pity. I was looking forward to you surpassing Patriarch Luo Qinglin's record. Oh right, I forgot to tell him Luo Yuling's identity. This qi training pill is enough for me to reach the peak of the 7th phase. Next, I will use a few days to consolidate and refine my sword qi. Then I will prepare to break through the bottleneck and reach the 8th phase. Chu put away the porcelain bottle and slowly displayed his body movement in the wind. His figure drifted in the direction of the towering wind courtyard. Directly in front of him were 2 disciples madly sprinting towards Chu, bringing with them gusts of wind. Chu's body moved with the wind and naturally dodged the 2 disciples. Wait, that seems to be Senior Brother Chu. One of the disciples suddenly stopped and turned around. He suddenly realized something and quickly shouted, Senior Brother Chu, wait! Chu stopped in his tracks. He was like a falling leaf, drifting down naturally. There was an indescribable charm to him. Senior Brother Chu, we finally found you. The 2 disciples gasped for breath. What is it? Chu's expression was indifferent. Senior Brother Chu, there is something very important. Elder Lin asked us to look for you. It's like this, Senior Brother Chu. This disciple spoke a few simple sentences and explained the course of events. A glint flashed through Chu's eyes. The sun set in the west, leaving a touch of red on the horizon. The sky gradually darkened, and large gusts of cold wind blew, causing people's black hair to dance and their clothes to flutter. Congratulations, Chu. You've created a record that can be considered impossible. Chun Jin's eyes flickered as he stared at Chu. He smiled from the bottom of his heart. You are the second disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect to guard the sword platform for 30 days. You are qualified to leave your name at the top of the battle sword tablet. This is an honor that belongs to you. Who was the first? Chu was not very excited. He asked indifferently. It was Patriarch Luo Qinglin. Qin Jin said with a face full of admiration and longing. He was extremely excited. Chu nodded. He did not have any impression of Luo Qinglin. After all, he was the patriarch. He did not know how many years ago. Chu's indifference made Qin Jin unable to vent his excitement. He had no target. In the end, he resentfully took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Chu. This is what you deserve. Qin Jin threw the porcelain bottle to Chu and spoke in a slightly unhappy tone. Chu smiled and took the porcelain bottle. Inside was a qi cultivating pill. He turned around and left a sentence. I won't be coming back tomorrow. Not coming tomorrow? Then you have given up on the sword platform. Qin Jin looked at Chu's back and repeated to himself. He looked a little regretful. What a pity. I was looking forward to you surpassing Patriarch Luo Qinglin's record. Oh right, I forgot to tell him Luo Yuling's identity. This Qi training pill is enough for me to reach the peak of the 7th phase. Next, I will use a few days to consolidate and refine my sword Qi. Then I will prepare to break through the bottleneck and reach the 8th phase. Chu Mu put away the porcelain bottle and slowly displayed his body movement in the wind. His figure drifted in the direction of the towering wind courtyard. Directly in front of him were 2 disciples madly sprinting towards Chu Mu, bringing with them gusts of wind. Chu Mu's body moved with the wind and naturally dodged the 2 disciples. Wait, that seems to be Senior Brother Chu. One of the disciples suddenly stopped and turned around. He suddenly realized something and quickly shouted, "Senior Brother Chu, wait!" Chu Mu stopped in his tracks. He was like a falling leaf, drifting down naturally. There was an indescribable charm to him. "Senior Brother Chu, we finally found you." The 2 disciples gasped for breath. "What is it?" Chu Mu's expression was indifferent. "Senior Brother Chu, there is something very important. Elder Lin asked us to look for you. It's like this, Senior Brother Chu." This disciple spoke a few simple sentences and explained the course of events. A glint flashed through Chu Mu's eyes. He turned around and used the wind travel movement technique. Like a gust of wind, he left in the blink of an eye. As expected of Senior Brother Chu, even his body movement is so exquisite. Once Senior Brother Chu makes a move, the opponent will lose without a doubt. Let's go. We can't miss such a wonderful scene. When will that disciple named Chu Mu arrive? It's late now. I have to return to the Qinglan sword sect for dinner. Elder Yao Ri was a little impatient. I think you'd better admit defeat obediently. Don't waste my time. Are you afraid? Elder Lin narrowed his eyes and said casually, "What, afraid? Since when have I been afraid?" After being provoked, Elder Yao Ri's eyes widened again. A breath as hot as the sun spread out from his body, dispelling the chill in the wind. The heat wave hit. Hualong go all out later. Let them know that the swordsmanship of the disciples of Qinglan sword sect is beyond their reach. Yes, master. Su, Hualong replied firmly. He's here. Senior Brother Chu is here. A sharp-eyed disciple shouted loudly. His hands were dancing and his cheeks were flushed. He was very excited. He's here. Senior Brother Chu is finally back. Great. Now that Senior Brother Chu is here, let's see how arrogant you can be. Whether it was the disciples of Rumbling Thunder Courtyard, Jadewater Courtyard, or Soaring Wind Courtyard, all of them were excited. Now in their hearts, Chu Mu was a kind of spiritual sustenance, their last reliance, and their spiritual faith. He's finally here. Elder Lin smiled and nodded secretly. Chu Mu quickly rushed over and saluted Elder Lin with his sword. So you're Chu Mu. Why don't you use the sword greeting when you see this elder? Could it be that Qingfeng sword sect taught you this way? Not differentiating between seniors and juniors? Elder Yao Ri's eyes shot out a scarlet light. His scorching gaze was like a sword that shot towards Chu Mu. This kind of gaze and aura seemed to be melting Chu Mu. Su Qilai was shocked and subconsciously took 2 steps back. The disciples next to Chu Mu were even more shocked. They could not bear it and retreated one after another. Elder Lin's face changed and was about to make a move. If it's someone worthy of respect, I will naturally salute, Chu Mu said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Although Elder Yao Ri's gaze was sharp and brought great pressure to Chu Mu, for Chu Mu who had experienced the sword aura of the Sword Pavilion elders, it was not enough to make Chu Mu retreat. Well said. Elder Lin was happy, as if he had drunk iced sour plum soup on a hot day. Elder Yao Ri was so angry that his face turned red. He almost could not help but cripple Chu Mu. Wasn't Chu Mu insinuating that he was not worthy of respect? Good, you're really sharp-tongued. I hope your sword skills can be as sharp. Elder Yao Ri took a few deep breaths and suppressed his anger. His voice was cold and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Hualong, don't hold back. Yes, master. Su Hualong understood that Elder Yao Ri wanted to cripple Chu Mu. Chu Mu's rebuttal had completely angered Elder Yao Ri. Chu Mu, I thought you wouldn't dare to come. Su Hualong looked straight at Chu Mu. His gaze was as sharp as a sword and his voice was cold. Today, I will return a sword strike to you and wipe away my previous humiliation. I understand. So this Su Hualong was defeated by Senior Brother Chu. Don't you know? When Senior Brother Chu was still in the outer sect, he once defeated Su Hualong with a single sword strike. Oh, no wonder. He actually wants to wipe away his previous humiliation. Let me tell you, it's impossible. If he fights with Senior Brother Chu, he will only be humiliated again. The words of the disciples of the 3 courtyards almost made Su Hualong vomit blood. He was even more furious. I will only use 1 sword strike, Chu Mu said. When Su Hualong heard this, he felt that these words were so familiar. Suddenly, he recalled the scene from a month ago. The mouthful of blood that he had suppressed surged up his throat and almost spurted out. After a while, Su Hualong finally swallowed this mouthful of blood back down. He stared at Chu Mu, his 100 refined sword's edge threatening as he sternly said, Chu Mu, the current me is no longer the me of the past. Not only is my sword aura cultivation many times stronger, my sword technique attainments have also increased by a lot. Let me tell you, you better kneel down and admit defeat now. Otherwise, my sword doesn't have eyes. When the time comes, you will lose all your face. Don't regret it. Make your move. Compared to Su Hualong's arrogant threat, Chu Mu seemed very calm. The contrast was huge, making people feel that Su Hualong was like a clown. The light red sword qi circulated and attached to the blade. Heat waves rolled. When the sword was drawn, it was like a stream of fire, evaporating all the water in the surroundings and drying up all the vitality. Intermediate swordsmanship. Flowing fire swordsmanship. 1 sword strike after another turned into streams of fire and attacked. The temperature in the air rose, making people feel stuffy and thirsty. It was as if it had turned from November evening to July noon. Everyone turned pale with fright. Elder Lin's eyes narrowed while Elder Yao revealed a smug expression. He nodded secretly as if he was affirming Su Hualong's swordsmanship. Chu Mu's eyes were sharp, and he could see every sword clearly. His footsteps moved, and as light as a feather, he dodged 1 sword after another. The heat from each sword didn't affect Chu Mu at all. Although the first layer of sword qi protection secret art couldn't block the direct attack of the 100 refinement sword, it could isolate the heat and remain unaffected. Impossible. Su Hualong couldn't believe it. The flowing fire swordsmanship was taught to him by Elder Yao Ri. Elder Yao Ri gave him wholeheartedly, allowing him to get close to Desheng within a month. The specialty of the flowing fire swordsmanship was that every sword strike was like a stream of fire. Even if it didn't hit the target, it would cause the temperature in the air to rise continuously. It would make people feel stuffy and hot, irritated and irritated, thus revealing their flaws. However, Chu Mu wasn't affected at all. Instead, he looked as if he was bathing in a cool breeze with a leisurely expression. Chu Mu's body movement technique is so profound. Elder Yao Ri frowned. Your swordsmanship has indeed improved a lot compared to a month ago. However, it's still not enough for me. It's still too weak. Chu Mu said softly as he dodged Su Hualong's fire-like sword strikes. This made Su Hualong restless. Soon after, Chu Mu drew his sword. There was a clanging sound that was like the sound of metal from outer space. It reverberated through the heavens and earth. A snow-white radiance shot out sharply under the dusk. It was like an aurora splitting the sky. It was like a gust of wind blowing. Su Hualong squinted his eyes unconsciously. His hand paused as he felt his sword being pushed away. He then felt a piercing pain in his throat. Chu Mu's sword was pressed against Su Hualong's throat. Su Hualong unconsciously opened his arms. As the wind blew, his black hair fluttered. This scene was like an imprint in the wind. Chapter 55. The sky had darkened and the wind was chilly. However, Su Hualong's heart was even colder. It was so cold that he shivered as if he was about to freeze. A shadow was growing in the depths of his heart, and it quickly expanded and spread. He was disheartened. After practicing hard for more than a month, his cultivation base and swordsmanship had improved tremendously. He wanted to avenge his humiliation. However, not only did he fail to avenge his humiliation, he was defeated again. He was defeated by a sword, and there was a red mark on his throat. Chu Mu glanced at Su Hualong and saw the gloominess in his eyes. He knew that if there were no accidents, Su Hualong would be depressed because of the heavy blow. Eventually, he would be annihilated by the crowd. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu turned around without saying a word. Elder Yao Ri stared at Chu Mu. His eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a murderous intent in them. This boy's cultivation base is only at the late stage of the 7th stage of the Sword Chi realm. However, his swordsmanship is unpredictable. Even I was shocked by that sword. Elder Yao re-muttered to himself, "This is almost impossible, but it's happening right in front of our eyes." This child's attainments in swordsmanship far exceed his cultivation level. Even a swordsman at the peak of stage 8 would not be his match. Once this boy's sword chi cultivation base reaches the 10th stage, he may be able to fight against an ordinary chi transformation realm. No, absolutely not. Such a disciple can only be in the Qinglan sword sect. If he is not a disciple of Qinglan, he must not be allowed to grow. Chu Mu, right? Your swordsmanship is indeed very good. Elder Yao Ri's murderous intent was restrained. He squeezed out a kind smile like a wolf. Come to the Qinglan sword sect. I can accept you as a pro-disciple and do my best to train you so that your sword chi cultivation base can reach the 10th stage within 2 years. Within 5 years, you can break through to the chi transformation realm. Elder Lin's face suddenly changed. He was very angry. How dare he poach Su Hualong so blatantly? He did not put the Qing Feng sword sect in his eyes. Elder Yao Ri, you are too presumptuous. This is not the Qinglan sword sect. Elder Lin shouted sternly as his eyes glowed. A strong gust of wind blew over, causing his black hair to flutter and his clothes to flutter. His aura was astonishing as it swept towards Elder Yao Ri. This place will belong to the Qinglan sword sect sooner or later. Elder Luminous Sun laughed out loud, and a shocking red glow shot out from his eyes. Sword chi swirled around his body, red and hot. The air was scorched, and the surrounding grass quickly withered. He was like a dazzling red sun, and Su Chilai retreated again and again. What do you mean by that? Can I take it that the Qinglan sword sect intends to wage a full-scale war with us? Elder Lin's face was gloomy, and the wind around him became stronger and stronger. The wind whistled as it blew, and the grass was broken. His tone became cold and sharp. I didn't say that. Elder Yao Ri laughed. His aura rose again, and the strong wind dissipated because of the scorching heat. He was not stupid. Although the Qinglan sword sect had always thought of itself as the orthodox sect of Qinglan Mountain, and had always wanted to subdue the Qingfeng sword sect and Qingshui sword sect, it was only an idea, and they had no intention of putting it into action. Therefore, if he admitted that the Qinglan sword sect intended to go to war with the Qingfeng sword sect, it would inevitably lead to a bloody conflict between the two major sword sections. The consequences were not something that an elder like him could bear. Cut the crap. Your disciple has been defeated. According to the bet, you have to apologize to us and leave our sword sect immediately. Elder Lin certainly did not want the two major sword sects to have a bloody conflict. The current Qingfeng sword sect was still a little weaker than the Qinglan sword sect. Apologize? Elder Yao Ri's lips curled into a sneer, and he looked at Chu Mu. You haven't answered my question. Do you want to leave the Qingfeng sword sect and come under my wing? It is not easy to break through to the Qi transformation realm in 5 years. You haven't apologized yet." Chu Mu's eyes were calm as he said, "Apologize? Ha! Why should I apologize? Why should I apologize?" Elder Yao Ri was very arrogant, and from his body he exuded a stronger and hotter aura. Many of the disciples could not bear it, and they all backed away. Chu Mu also felt a scorching heat on his face, as if his whole body was close to a burning furnace. Sweat flowed out, and he was very shocked. "If you agree to a bet, you have to accept your loss. A person with a bad character, no matter how high his cultivation or how good his sword skills are, has no right to teach me," Chu Mu said lightly, and Elder Lin was immediately satisfied. Elder Yao Ri's face changed, and the killing intent that he had been hiding almost exploded. "A mere disciple dares to teach me a lesson? Do you think that with your little sword skills, you have the right to make me apologize?" Elder Yao Ri's voice was like a bell, and his whole body exuded a crimson light, like a raging fire, like a big fireball. That was how the name Yao Ri came to be. "Right or wrong is in the heart of the people," Chu Mu replied and moved closer to Elder Lin, away from Elder Yao Ri. "Yao Ri, apologize immediately and get out of the Qingfeng sword sect." Elder Lin was furious, and his aura was very sharp. The wind was like a blade circling around his body, and the sword on his back was vibrating slightly, making a soft sound, as if it was going to be unsheathed at any time. "Do you want to start a fight with me? Come, I don't mind showing you the power of the Yao Ri sword technique." The sword on Elder Yao Ri's back was also vibrating, exuding a scorching heat, as if it was about to be unsheathed. When the surrounding disciples heard this, they were shocked and they all backed away. The aura of the two elders was already unbearable, and they had no choice but to back away. If they were to fight, the aftershock of the sword qi would be enough to kill them. Even Chu Mu, who had an extremely strong will and the protection of the sword qi, had to back away. The aura of the two elders was too strong, too hot, and too strong. If you want to fight, there will be plenty of chances in the future. Elder Lin's aura weakened slightly, not because he was afraid, but because he was thinking about the disciples. This was because if they were to fight, the aftershock of the sword qi would be so strong that even a stage 10 sword qi realm cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand it, let alone these stage 7 and stage 8 disciples. "I knew you wouldn't have the guts." Elder Yao Ri sneered. He knew Elder Lin's scruples, and if their positions were reversed, he would also hold back. This time, Hualong has indeed lost, but it doesn't count because Hualong's flowing fire sword technique hasn't reached Desheng yet. When Hualong's flowing fire sword technique reaches Desheng's level, I will bring him to challenge him again. Shameless to such an extent, he is already invincible. When the disciples of the 3 inner halls heard this, they were furious. They couldn't imagine how there could be such a shameless person who didn't admit his loss, and was even an elder of a sect. While looking down on Elder Yao Ri, Chu Mu was more vigilant. He looked down on Elder Yao Ri from the bottom of his heart because he was too tasteless. However, it was also because of this that such people often didn't have much misgivings when doing things. Chu Mu believed that this time he had offended Elder Yao Ri to the point of death. He would definitely remember this deeply in his heart. Fortunately, he was far away from Elder Yao Ri and close to Elder Lin. Otherwise, Elder Yao Ri might suddenly attack him because of this. In fact, Elder Yao Ri had planned to attack and kill or cripple Chu Mu when he least expected it. However, Chu Mu was too cunning. He actually stayed away from him and close to Elder Lin, and Elder Lin was very guarded against him, so he didn't have a chance. This elder will come again. Elder Yao Ri didn't seem to care about the whispers of the disciples. He took a deep look at Chu Mu, and Chu Mu felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious wolf or a poisonous snake. He couldn't help but feel cold all over. "Chu Mu, not bad, very good. a very outstanding disciple. I hope that the next time I see you, you will still be around. You don't have to worry about me. I will always live well. Chu said. The cold feeling on his body disappeared, and Elder Yao returned and left with some reluctance. Chapter 56. The sky was dark, the mountain wind was strong, and the chill was deep. Elder Yao led Su Hualong and Su Qilai out of Qingfeng's sword sect. They followed the rugged mountain path and headed towards Qinglan's sword sect. Su Hualong did not say a word along the way. His face was gloomy and his eyes were lifeless. He had suffered a heavy blow. Elder Yao glanced at him and was secretly angry. He valued Su Hualong's talent and wanted to nurture him well. But now, if he could not overcome this obstacle and break through the shadow in his heart, his life would be ruined. On the other hand, if he could break through the shadow in his heart, he would definitely have a new breakthrough and become stronger. However, he could only rely on himself. The help of external forces was very little. Hualong, that Chu Mu's swordsmanship attainment is indeed extraordinary. Elder Yao thought for a while and decided to help him as much as possible. There are 2 reasons why you lost. First, you cared too much about gains and losses, which led to your inability to bring out the best of your swordsmanship. Second, your flowing fire swordsmanship is not as powerful as Deshang's. The power that you could bring out is not even half of what it should be. Moreover, being defeated is nothing to a swordsman. No matter if it's once, twice, or 10 times, a true swordsman can only be as straight as a sword after experiencing many defeats, pressing forward courageously. Su Hualong's lifeless eyes moved slightly before falling silent again. Elder Yao knew that his words should have had some effect. However, Su Hualong still needed to think things through on his own in order to truly break free from the shadow. That would take some time. Elder, I just remembered something. Su Qilai suddenly said, more than a month ago, when senior brother Hualong came to sweep through the outer sect of the Green Edge Sword Sect, he was defeated by Chu Mu. At that time, Chu Mu seemed to be returning from the 100 Beast Valley. At that time, senior brother Li He and the others were in the 100 Beast Valley. What are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that Li He's death is related to this Chu Mu? Elder Luminous Sun glanced at Su Qilai, giving him a fright. He hurriedly replied, Elder, I think it's possible. Idiot, what's the use of saying it now? Elder Luminous Sun rebuked angrily, giving Su Qilai a big fright. Chu Mu's attainments in swordsmanship are too terrifying. This kind of person cannot be allowed to grow. Elder Yao looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes as if he was deep in thought. He said to himself, there wasn't a suitable opportunity to make a move just now. Once we return to the sword sect, we must make the necessary arrangements. The moment Chu Mu leaves the Green Edge Sword Sect, we must immediately kill him and eliminate any future troubles. Senior brother, you're back. Seeing Chu Mu, Li Wei's big eyes fluttered in surprise. She looked very happy. I've already prepared the dishes. Good. Thank you for your hard work. Chu Mu smiled and walked up to the 2nd floor. Li Wei hurriedly carried the dishes up to the 2nd floor. After chatting for a while, Li Wei returned to the 1st floor. Chu Mu focused on enjoying the food and drinking a small cup of wine. He temporarily forgot about everything else and only used the tip of his tongue to feel the world. Little Wei, I plan to go into seclusion for a period of time. It will probably take 10 days to half a month. During this time, I'll have to trouble you. Don't let anyone disturb me. Chu Mu said while Li Wei was cleaning up the dishes. Yes, senior brother. Li Wei immediately replied and looked at Chu Mu curiously. Senior brother, are you going to make a breakthrough in your cultivation? Yes. Chu Mu nodded and didn't say much. Although Li Wei was so curious that her heart was like a cat's paw, she still didn't ask. After cleaning up, she went down the stairs. Tomorrow, I'll refine the Qi refining pill and truly reach the peak of stage 7. After that, I'll use about 5 days to consolidate my cultivation and about 10 days to make a breakthrough. Chu Mu had a more detailed plan in his heart. Now, I'll comprehend the sword force. After returning from the sword battle arena for a month, Chu Mu cultivated to comprehend the sword force. In Chu Mu's mind, he constantly recalled the pressure of Wenren Yun's aura and the powerful aura of Elder Yao Ri and Elder Lin. At this moment, Li Wei just happened to walk up to the second floor. Her petite body unconsciously trembled, and she was greatly alarmed. She only felt that, although the Chu Mu in front of her was silently sitting, there was an extremely peculiar and powerful aura emanating from him. Straight as a sword, sharp as a sword, tenacious as a sword, indomitable as a sword, his figure became infinitely tall. Senior Brother Chu, what are you cultivating? Li Wei couldn't control her body and trembled slightly. Even her hands and feet were weak, and she almost knelt down and almost suffocated. Her small face was pale and blue. She quickly retreated down the stairs and stepped back to the first floor. Only then did she gasp for breath and leaned against the wall. Unknowingly, Chu Mu had already comprehended a little of the sword force. Qinglan's sword sect is getting more and more arrogant, the Lingfeng Palm Academy secretly muttered. There was a strange light in their eyes. Well, this time, if it weren't for the appearance of Chu Mu, I'm afraid that our 3 academies would have been swept away. Our reputation would be greatly damaged, and it would encourage the arrogance of Qinglan's sword sect. Elder Lin said in a deep voice. When he talked about Chu Mu, his face was full of satisfaction. Immediately there was some regret. It was a pity that such a genius couldn't be accepted as a disciple. Moreover, Yao Ri, that shameless thing, even brazenly poached Chu Mu and threatened to cultivate Chu Mu into a Qi transformation realm expert within 5 years. Elder Lin thought of this and felt indignant. Master, in my opinion, we might as well take out a portion of the elixirs and give it to Chu Mu so that Chu Mu's cultivation can improve as soon as possible. Although a truly powerful swordsman needs some external help, this kind of external help still has to be earned by oneself. The Lingfeng Palm Academy said calmly. Except for him, no one else knew that Chu Mu had already comprehended the concept of wind. No one knew how much importance he attached to Chu Mu. It was not that the Lingfeng Palm Academy wanted those elixirs. The most important thing was that the Lingfeng Palm Academy hoped that Chu Mu could obtain them through his own ability. This was the path that every excellent swordsman had to go through. Yes, Chu Mu's current cultivation is at the late 7th stage. It is said that he has been guarding the arena for a month. There should be one last Qi refining pill left. After consuming it, he can reach the peak of the 7th stage. Elder Lin nodded and said, next he should first consolidate his cultivation and then break through to the 8th stage. Yes, once he breaks through to the 8th stage, with his attainments in swordsmanship, he will be able to defeat the early 9th stage. He will be able to contend against the middle 9th stage or even the late 9th stage. He will already be qualified to participate in the Qingfeng sword battle in a few months. The Lingfeng Palm Academy nodded with a look of anticipation on his face. That's right. The 3 inner courts have never shown their talents in the Qingfeng sword battle. This time it's all up to Chu Mu. Elder Lin's eyes shone with incomparable hope and anticipation. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. I have completely consolidated my sword Qi cultivation at the peak of the 7th stage. The side effects of consuming the elixir have basically been eliminated. It's time to break through to the 8th stage. Sitting on the balcony, facing the rising sun, Chu Mu exhaled a mouthful of white air that shot out a few meters like a sword. On the 6th day, the peak of the 7th stage, sword Qi circulated through his body and began to rush into a brand new meridian, opening it up bit by bit. After opening up this meridian, his sword Qi cultivation would also be able to break through to the 8th stage. On the 7th day, a third of the meridian had been opened. On the 8th day, half of the meridian had been opened. On the 9th day, 3/5 of the meridian had been opened. On the 10th day, on the 11th day, every day, the efficiency of opening up the meridian became lower and lower, and the difficulty became higher and higher. Chumu closed his eyes tightly, focused and focused. He didn't have any other thoughts in his mind. He could only continuously control the sword chi, attack, disperse, and attack again. This cycle repeated. 12th day, 13th day, 14th day, 15th day. There's only a little bit of blockage left. Let's break through this final obstacle in one go. Chumu circulated the sword chi 3 times, and after accumulating the energy, it was like a flood breaking through a mountain or like a thunderbolt tearing through the sky. Chumu could feel that this meridian was faintly aching under the impact of the powerful sword chi. Break, like a thunderous explosion. Chumu only felt an incomparable pain as if his meridians were about to explode. In the next second, he was drowned by a tide-like pleasure. The sword aura's transportation speed involuntarily increased, washing over him and letting out the sound of a rolling river. The 8th stage of sword chi was achieved. Book ID equals 2508771. Book name equals The Ultimate Villain. Chapter 57. It was still the darkness before dawn, and the chill was even colder than before. The grass and trees behind the rocks by the pond were covered in a thin layer of frost. It was already the beginning of winter. The air was very fresh, and there was a trace of coldness. Chumu took a deep breath, and the coldness entered his lungs from his nostrils. His spirit was lifted, and he was very clear-headed. Walking to the balcony, he stretched his muscles and sat down cross-legged. Chumu began a new day of training. Zhongyuan Sword Chi Manual. The sword chi moved, and immediately it flowed through his meridians like a river. It was much better than yesterday. The sword chi of the 8th stage of the sword chi realm was twice as much as that of the 7th stage, and it was twice as pure. Most importantly, the 8th stage of the sword chi realm could release sword chi 10 meters away. In addition, the Zhongyuan Sword Chi Manual had reached the 4th level. After completing 24 cycles, Chumu's cultivation stabilized once more. He casually pointed a finger, and with a sharp whoosh, a ray of white sword chi shot through the air. In the blink of an eye, it traveled 10 meters before dissipating. The release of sword chi from the 8th stage is similar to external sword chi. In the future, I can mix external sword chi into it, making it difficult for others to detect. Chumu muttered to himself, "After I finish the 2nd level of the sword chi protective secret technique, I'll practice my sword arts first and consolidate my sword chi cultivation for a few days before continuing to the arena." After a month of hard training, Chumu's external sword chi range had reached 4 meters, and the sword chi protective secret technique was even more effective. Under Chumu's control, the external sword chi quickly flowed on his skin like an invisible stream. It was refined over and over again, making the invisible sword chi protective secret technique stronger and stronger. As he trained, the external sword chi suddenly sped up uncontrollably. After a few cycles, it paused and naturally dissipated. I finished the 2nd level. Chumu was a little surprised. He carefully sensed that he had indeed finished the 2nd level of the sword chi protective secret technique. Good. My 1 month of hard work was not in vain. I finally succeeded. Chumu's lips curled into a smile. The 1st layer can block the sharpness of a fine steel sword. The 2nd layer can block the sharpness of a 100-tempered sword. Let me try. Drawing his sword, Chumu gently cut his arm. He only felt that it was a little obscure. There seemed to be a thin white mark where he cut, but it quickly disappeared. All right, the 2nd level can block the attack of the 100 refined sword. Let me see if I can block the release of the 8th phase sword chi. As he spoke, a thin strand of sword chi emerged from Chumu's finger and shot towards his arm. With a poochie sound, the sword chi dissipated and his arm was unharmed. However, Chu Mu could clearly feel that the protective sword chi in the area that was hit by the sword chi instantly collapsed, but very quickly the surrounding sword chi was absorbed and replenished. It's a pity that there are no cultivation techniques for the future. Chu Mu thought to himself and felt a little regretful. Although with my attainments in swordsmanship and movement techniques, I usually won't be attacked by the enemy, but sometimes I can still play a huge role. As the sun rose, a touch of dark red fell on the pond, creating a multicolored light. Chu Mu carried his sword downstairs and found that Li Wei had woken up surprisingly early to practice her sword. "Good morning, senior brother." Li Wei's small face was covered in sweat, sparkling under the morning sun. When she saw Chu Mu, she immediately withdrew her sword and greeted him. Facing the morning sun, this kind of vitality and freshness made Chu Mu's eyes light up. He revealed a smile from the bottom of his heart and nodded. After giving Li Wei a few pointers, Chu Mu came to the Ling Feng Sword Discourse Arena and discovered that he was not the first one. On the Sword Discourse Arena, there were already more than 30 disciples practicing their swordsmanship, and there were still people rushing over. Although it was a little later than usual, it also meant that the atmosphere of the disciples of the Soaring Wind Courtyard was very good. "Good morning, senior brother Chu." When these disciples saw Chu Mu walking over, they immediately stopped practicing. As if they had rehearsed, they all saluted to Chu Mu and shouted loudly, giving Chu Mu a fright. "Good morning, everyone." Chu Mu returned the sword salute. Senior brother Chu is really elegant. He is not arrogant at all just because his swordsmanship is brilliant. That's right, some people, if their swordsmanship is a little stronger, their nostrils will be raised to the sky. No matter how strong this kind of person is, they can't compare to senior brother Chu. If it was said that Chu Mu in the past was someone who made people revere his swordsmanship, then the current Chu Mu was someone who made people respect him even more. Not long after practicing the sword, a deacon came to the Sword Discourse Arena and told Chu Mu that the sect leader had invited him. Why is the sect leader looking for senior brother Chu? Maybe he has taken a fancy to senior brother Chu's talent and wants to take him in as his disciple. I don't know, but I feel that it's definitely not a bad thing. Not bad. Your sword chi cultivation has reached the 8th stage. Seeing Chu Mu, a hint of green flashed across the Soaring Wind Academy's eyes. He clapped his hands and laughed. What about the concept of wind? Has it improved? 20%. Chu Mu said after saluting with his sword. 20%. The sect leader was shocked at first, but then his eyes lit up. His gaze was as if he was looking at a rare treasure. His gaze was so sharp that it seemed as if he could see through Chu Mu, causing Chu Mu's scalp to go numb. Good, good, good. In less than 10 years, your comprehension of the concept of wind will surpass mine. The sect leader's tone was already somewhat excited. 20% of the concept of wind. Chu Mu was only 16 years old. What was he doing when he was 16? The sect leader couldn't help but think back. When he was 16 years old, he seemed to be a disciple of the Soaring Wind Academy who had just entered the 8th stage. He didn't know anything about the concept of wind. For a moment, the sect leader felt a little ashamed. When they were both 16 years old, why was the difference so big? Furthermore, although the sect leader had recommended Chu Mu to go to the fierce wind cliff to comprehend the concept, it was only a possibility. Because the environment of the fierce wind cliff was constantly changing, it was indeed more suitable for the comprehension of the concept of wind, but it wasn't absolute. Furthermore, even if it was possible, it would take a long time. The sect leader had estimated that Chu Mu would have to stay at the fierce wind cliff for at least a year before he could make any progress in the concept of wind. As for reaching 20% from 10%, it would probably take 2 to 3 years. This was already a relatively fast estimate. But he didn't expect that in just a little over a month, Chu Mu had been punished by the fierce wind cliff to reflect on his mistakes for 7 days. In 7 days, his comprehension of the concept of wind had increased by 10%. Was he still human? Thinking about it, the sect leader's expression kept changing. He was absent-minded until Chumu lightly coughed and woke up. "Oh, right, I called you here this time because there's a letter from your family." Only then did the sect leader remember the important matter and quickly came back to his senses. A letter appeared in his hand, and he handed it to Chumu. A letter from home. Chumu was a bit surprised. After taking it over, he saw that it was from Mizar City's Chu family. The sender was Chu Xingyun, Chumu's father. "It's probably because we haven't seen each other for a long time and your parents miss you. Open it and take a look," the sect leader said indifferently. There was a trace of nostalgia in his eyes, as if he was reminiscing. Chumu nodded and opened the letter to read. The general content was, "I miss my son," and so on. It also said that soon it would be the 70th birthday of the Chu family's old patriarch, Chumu's grandfather. He hoped that Chumu could make a trip home. At that time, Chumu's big brother, Chu Tian, would also return home. Home? Chumu pondered for a moment. In the end, he decided to make a trip home. Firstly, his current identity was that of a disciple of the Chu family of Kaiyang City of the Great Kun Dynasty. In his memories, this grandfather of his treated him quite well. Secondly, it could be considered a training trip. When he returned, his early 8th phase sword chi would be completely consolidated. At that time, he would be able to enter the sword battle arena again. "Sect leader, I plan to make a trip home." Chumu said. "Yes, a swordsman cultivates without emotions. Family is also an indispensable part." The sect leader seemed to be implying something. "You can go home, but you must remember that you must return within 3 months. At that time, it will be the triennial Qingfeng sword battle arena. In the past, the 3 inner courtyards were just going through the motions. But this time, because of you, I believe that the sect leader will be able to obtain a better ranking. Moreover, if you enter the top 3, you will receive an extremely good reward. Even I am tempted. If you miss it, it will be a pity." Chumu nodded and pondered. He left the place and returned to the pavilion. After making some preparations, he left the Azure Edge Sword Sect. Book ID equals 2411809. Book name equals Martial Enemy of the World. Chapter 58. At the foot of Qinglan Mountain, there was a small town called Qinglan Town. Qinglan Town was the only town at the foot of Qinglan Mountain. Almost everyone who went in and out of Qinglan Mountain had to pass through it. Over time, Qinglan Town became lively and crowded. Chu Mu brought some dry food and water down Qinglan Mountain. When he arrived at Qinglan Town, it was already past noon. He found a small shop and had a bowl of beef noodles. After a short rest, he left Qinglan Town and headed in the direction of Kaiyang City. Kaiyang City was not particularly far from Qinglan Town. As long as he walked along the road, he would be able to reach it in about 2 days. Chu Mu did not use any means of transportation. Walking was also a kind of practice. Besides, his grandfather's birthday was in a few days. There was still time. What Chu Mu did not know was that since he entered Qinglan Town, pairs of eyes were secretly watching him and spreading the news to each other. Shortly after Chu Mu left Qinglan Town, some people also left with swords. The sun was setting in the west, and the sunset dyed half the sky red. Chu Mu was already quite far away from Qinglan Town. Tonight, he would have to sleep in the wild. Unknowingly, the sky was dark. Chu Mu walked to the side of the road. There were a few stones. He planned to stay here for the night and continue his journey in the morning. Eating jerky and drinking water, Chu Mu's movements paused. Looking back at the path he came from, 3 figures appeared. They sped up and leapt over. This let Chu Mu know that they were coming for him. I finally caught up. The 3 men spread out to form a triangle and surrounded Chu Mu. One of them was a strong middle-aged man. In the early winter, he was only wearing a short-sleeved shirt. His muscles bulged like rocks, and he carried a sword on his back. The other was a short, middle-aged man with a pointed mouth and monkey cheeks. He had triangular eyes and looked very sinister. Two short swords hung from his waist. The third person looked very ordinary. He was a middle-aged man without any protrusions. He was expressionless and carried a very ordinary sword. However, it was him that made Chu-Mu feel a trace of danger. "What business do the three of you have?" Chu-Mu wordlessly put down the jerky and glanced at the 100 refinement, sword to the side, as he spoke indifferently. His aura-observing art could not see through their cultivation, which meant that their sword chi cultivation was above Chu-Mu's. Nothing serious. The brawny man grinned, revealing a mouthful of big yellow teeth. His eyes flashed with a strange light. "I just want to borrow something from you." "What is it?" Chu-Mu followed the other party's words and suddenly threw the jerky to the ordinary-looking middle-aged man. He grabbed the 100 refined sword and unsheathed it with a clang. The snow-white sword light illuminated the darkness like lightning. This sword, with an incomparably swift and fierce posture, pierced towards the brawny man like a fierce wind. "Borrow your—" Before the last two words came out, the brawny man was shocked by Chu-Mu's actions. It was completely unexpected. The sword light was so dazzling that he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. At the same time, he fiercely stomped on the ground and quickly retreated, holding the sword hilt with a backhand grip. Unsheathing and slashing down, the big sword could split mountains and split rocks. The strong wind whistled, and a strong pressure rolled. In an instant, this brawny man's rich battle experience and adaptability were displayed. At the same time, the ordinary-looking, middle-aged man unsheathed his sword. The sword was extremely fast. It drew an arc and cut open the jerky. A light green sword chi shot through the air towards Chu-Mu. The short, middle-aged man crossed his hands and pulled out his short sword. He was almost close to the ground. He was silent and fast. The short sword was sharp and flashed with a cold and sharp light. It stabbed towards Chu-Mu's feet, top, middle, and bottom. The three sides cooperated skillfully, and the power was shocking. However, Chu-Mu used wind travel, and his body seemed to float in the air as if he was weightless. The 100 refined sword lightly knocked against the large sword, causing the sword to vibrate and knock the large sword away. His body borrowed the force to shift to the side, drawing an arc and dodging the sword aura and the short middle-aged man's attack. Turning around, like a swallow flying back, the sword cut horizontally. It was extremely beautiful and full of killing intent. The brawny man's eyes were filled with shock. He desperately wanted to dodge, but he was still a bit too slow. With a swoosh, Chu-Mu's sword cut through the brawny man's neck. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Taking advantage of the momentum, Chu-Mu's body was light as a feather. His sword was like the wind, stabbing towards the short middle-aged man. The speed was too fast. The short middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. He hurriedly waved his two short swords and desperately retreated. The ordinary-looking, middle-aged man was shocked. He used his killer move. The sky was filled with sword shadows like a fierce wind, completely enveloping Chu-Mu. Intermediate sword art. Hurricane sword art's killer move. Hurricane kill. Chu-Mu changed his sword style and used the dazzling breeze. Under the 20% wind mentality, the power of the dazzling breeze was not inferior to a normal intermediate killer move. The cold killing intent and the sword shadows clashed and canceled each other out. Chu-Mu's left hand pointed forward. The sword chi cut through the air and attacked the short middle-aged man. Damn it! How is this a new inner disciple of the sword faction? The short middle-aged man cursed. He waved his short sword continuously, blocking Chu-Mu's sword chi and counterattacking. He held his two swords and stabbed out in a cross. His body rose into the air and spun at high speed. He rushed towards Chu-Mu like an electric drill. Around him, the air was torn into pieces. It was extremely sharp and dust was flying everywhere. The airflow intensified. Chu Mu's right foot tapped on his left foot and used his wind travel body art. He followed the airflow and floated to the side. Cloud's mentality, shocking cloud kill. This guy is so hard to deal with. The ordinary-looking, middle-aged man's face changed. He used his killer move again. Hurricane kill. As the killing moves collided, sword chi crisscrossed and sliced through the air, creating a sizzling sound that caused one scalp to go numb. Chu Mu took the opportunity to retreat and avoid the violent wind kill. Hurricane kill. Under the 20% wind mentality, the power of the hurricane kill increased by several times. The 1-meter-long light blue wind blade followed Chu Mu's attack and flew towards the short middle-aged man. No. The short middle-aged man panicked. He waved his 2 swords again and again. The sword chi surrounded him and tried to block the wind blade. With a poochie sound, the sword chi was shattered and the 2 swords were blown away. The wind blade chopped off the short, middle-aged man's 2 forearms and finally landed on his neck. His head flew up into the air. The wound was squirming and blood was gushing out like a fountain. The short, middle-aged man was scared out of his wits. He released 2 sword chi and attacked Chu Mu. Meanwhile, he retreated and ran for his life, trying to escape. Since you are here, then go down and accompany your companions. Chu Mu's eyes were filled with killing intent. He shouted and used his wind travel with all his strength. He avoided the sword chi and shot out like a gust of wind. The killing intent behind him made the middle-aged man pale. His face was full of shock and fear. He had never thought that the guy he thought was his prey would turn into a hunter and kill 2 of his companions in such a short time. This kind of strength was not something he could mess with. Gritting his teeth, the middle-aged man poured sword chi into his feet and used his movement art to run away. However, Chu Mu's movement art was better and faster. He quickly closed the distance. Sword chi shot out, and the middle-aged man had no time to dodge at all. He only felt a pain in his calf, and blood spurted out, almost causing him to fall forward. So, a figure flashed past him, and a cold sensation spread from his neck. A sword was placed on his neck. The middle-aged man's face was full of fear. His eyes were full of shock. His face was pale, and his lips were trembling. "Why do you want to kill me?" Staring into the middle-aged man's eyes, Chu Mu's voice was as cold as the northern wind in the middle of winter. "Speak." I said you can't kill me." The middle-aged man endured the pain in his calf and trembled. "If you don't speak, I will make 360 cuts on your body and let you slowly experience the feeling of death." Chu Mu's voice was even colder. The middle-aged man seemed to be imagining that scene. His face was even paler, and he could not help but tremble. It's Qinglan sword sect. They asked us to kill a new inner disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect. They even had a portrait. The middle-aged man was almost crying. This Qinglan sword sect was 2F** king deceitful. Qinglan sword sect. Chu Mu hesitated for a moment. You can't kill me." The middle-aged man seemed to have sensed Chu Mu's killing intent. But before he could finish speaking, Chu Mu's sword had already pierced his throat, causing his eyes to widen with boundless unwillingness. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell limply to the ground. Chapter 59. Qinglan town was filled with all kinds of people, and the most famous one was the Green Wolf Gang. The leader of the Green Wolf Gang, Duan Qingling, was a swordsman at the late stage of the 9th stage of the Sword Chi realm. His swordsmanship was excellent, and he was the best in Qinglan town. There were many masters in the gang, and the more famous ones were the Green Wolf Double Kill, Green Wolf 3 Unique, and Green Wolf 4 Swords. Usually, as the overlord of Qinglan town, no one dared to provoke the Green Wolf Gang. Of course, under normal circumstances, they would not be stupid enough to provoke the 3 major sword sections. However, this time, The Qinglan sword sect's offer was too generous. Duan Qinglang thought for a moment and decided to go all out. Anyway, it was just killing a new inner disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect. As long as it was done carefully, there should not be any future problems. On the contrary, after the matter was done, he would be able to obtain huge benefits, which would be enough to let his sword Qi realm break through to the 10th stage. The Green Wolf 3, unique, took the task. Their sword Qi realm was at the peak and late stage of the 8th stage. The three of them had worked together for many years and had a tacit understanding. Once they attacked together, even a swordsman at the early stage of the 9th stage would be defeated on the spot. Therefore, Duan Qinglang felt that it was enough for the three of them to kill Chu Mu. Not only was it enough, but it was also a bit of a waste of effort. The three of them had always been cautious, and one of them was his younger brother, so they were very trustworthy. However, to Duan Qinglang's surprise, the next morning, the Green Wolf 3 unique did not return. They were found dead on the side of the road a few miles away from Qinglan town. Duan Qinglang's eyes were bloodshot and murderous. He immediately mobilized the Green Wolf gang to investigate who killed the three of them, his brother. "Gang master, what do you think? Could it be Chu Mu's doing?" The gang's military advisor, Mo Yong, muttered to himself for a moment before speaking. "Impossible," Duan Qinglang said decisively. His eyes were filled with killing intent. According to the information provided by Qinglan sword sect, half a month ago, Chu Mu was only at the late 7th phase. Even if his cultivation speed was fast, he would at most be at the early stage of the 8th phase. Moreover, most of the disciples of the sword faction have not experienced life and death battles, so they are unable to display their full strength. It is absolutely impossible for them to be a match for the three of them. Yes, I've seen their wounds. They were all killed in one blow, clean and tidy. To be able to do this, the person's sword Qi cultivation is at least on par with theirs, and the person's swordsmanship is more exquisite than theirs. Moreover, the person must have a lot of fighting experience. Military Counselor Mo Yong nodded. Investigate thoroughly. Find out who did it. I won't let him go." Duan Qinglang growled in a low voice, his killing intent incomparably cold. There was a fierceness that said that no matter who the other party was, he would make them pay the price. "Also, have you found out Chu Mu's identity?" "Yes, he is a disciple of the Chu family in Kaiyang City," Mo Yong said. "Leader, the strength of the Chu family is much greater than that of our Qinglan gang. It is not advisable to fight them head-on." "I know. I don't intend to fight the Chu family head-on, but Chu Mu will definitely return to the Qingfeng sword sect. At that time, he will inevitably pass by Qinglan town," Duan Qinglang said, a bloodthirsty smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. "When the time comes, set up an inescapable net, capture him alive, and torture him. Leader, don't worry. I have already ordered that once Chu Mu's traces are found, they will immediately take action. Even if he grows a pair of wings, he will not be able to escape," Mo Yong said with confidence in his eyes. The scorching sun shone in the sky. Chu Mu walked quickly on the sandy road, heading towards Kaiyang City. Last night, he was intercepted by 3 people, but Chu Mu killed them instead. He also learned that the Qinglan sword sect was behind everything. Qinglan sword sect. In all likelihood, it is that old bastard elder Yao Ri who is behind this. Chu Mu's heart was filled with killing intent. That old bastard Yao Ri is extraordinary. He is a master of the Qi transformation realm. The gap between me and him is too big. I am not his opponent at all. I can only endure for now. When I am strong enough, I will definitely kill him. From the bodies of the 3 people he killed, Chu Mu found some silver, a few Qi recovery pills, Qi gathering pills, and blood staunching pills. As for the other things, they were useless and worthless. Although their swords were worth some silver, it was not convenient to carry them around, so Chu Mu did not touch them. Chu Mu did not know the identities of the 3 people, nor did he know that there were people in Qinglan town who hated him. When he returned, there would be a bloody storm. He traveled during the day and rested at night to practice his swordsmanship. The next day, he woke up early to practice his swordsmanship. As for sword chi, because it was not suitable to be disturbed in the wild, he had to put it aside for the time being. In the blink of an eye, another day passed and Chumu finally arrived at Kaiyang City. The gates of Kaiyang City were wide open. On the left and right of the gate stood 2 armored swordsman guards with long swords at their waists. They were motionless like 2 statues. Their eyes were sharp and looked straight ahead. Their auras were swift and fierce. There were many people coming in and out of Kaiyang City. Those who rode horses had to dismount when they arrived. Chu Mu glanced at the 2 swordsman guards and used Qi observation technique. He found that both of them were 7th-stage swordsmen, and their auras were condensed. They were obviously the kind of swordsmen who had experienced life and death battles. In the past, Chu Mu still had a bit of fame in Mazang City. However, the current him, compared to a few months ago, had changed greatly. His temperament was also different. Therefore, those who weren't familiar with him wouldn't be able to recognize him. Halt! This is the Chu family mansion. At the gate of the Chu family mansion, 2 7th-stage swordsman guards immediately grabbed the hilt of their swords and shouted when they saw Chu Mu coming. "I am Chu Mu." Chu Mu did not stop walking as he said, "Chu Mu." The 2 guards looked at each other. At first, they were confused, but then they suddenly realized. They said disapprovingly, "So young Master Chu is back. Please come in." Chu Mu did not care about their attitude. They were only 7th-stage swordsmen. In Chu Mu's eyes, they were like ants. He actually came back? It seems that he is different from a few months ago. He has changed a lot. I can't even recognize him. It is the old master's 70th birthday. It is normal for him to come back. As for the change, maybe his strength increased in the Azure Edge sword sect. That is right. Although it is only a low-rank sword sect, it is still many times stronger than our Chu family. This time, all the young masters and young ladies will come back. When they see Chu Mu, I wonder what will happen. It is not our business. We just need to do our job as guards. Stop. This is the Chu family mansion. You are not allowed to walk around. Chu Mu walked into the courtyard. As he walked through the corridor, he heard a shout from behind. He stopped and turned around. It was 7 or 8 young men and women of similar age. When they saw Chu Mu, they were stunned. It took them a while to react. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it is you, Chu Mu. You have changed a lot, haven't you? It seems that you are doing well in the Azure Edge sword sect." Their tone was somewhat mocking, which made Chu Mu feel both familiar and disgusted. In his impression, these guys were the children of some of the attendants of the Chu family. They often mocked and ridiculed Chu Mu. He only glanced at them indifferently. These people's cultivation bases were all below stage 7. They were even more unworthy of his attention. They were just a bunch of clowns. He turned around and continued walking. "Oh, you have improved." The face of the person who spoke immediately changed, and he sneered. Chu Mu's actions made him feel belittled, and he was secretly angry. Speaking of which, there are some people who think that just because they entered the sword faction, they are amazing and look down on us. They think that their growth is very awesome and they're high above us, insufferably arrogant. Chu Mu, stop right there. No matter what this guy said, Chu Mu acted as if he did not hear him. Attitude determined height. It was like a well-mannered adult who could not be bothered to pay attention to a brat with no upbringing. This attitude completely angered the 7 or 8 young men and women. Their expressions changed, and they all rushed toward Chu Mu, forming a circle and surrounding Chu Mu. "It has only been a few months. You have improved, right? Come, draw your sword. Let us see what kind of sword techniques you have learned in the Azure Edge sword sect. Don't waste our Chu clan's resources. You have entered the Azure Edge sword sect and learned nothing. What a disgrace. One of them mocked, while the others sneered. What are you doing? Suddenly a loud shout was heard. Everyone turned around and their expressions changed. They were all smiling. Brother Chu Tian, we are not doing anything. We just saw Chu Mu return and wanted to say hello to him. Get lost if you are done. Chu Tian strode forward with a stern face. His voice was like a thunderclap, shaking the heads of 7 or 8 people. Their footsteps were unsteady, and they hurriedly retreated in a daze. You better not let us see you alone. One of them threatened Chu Mu in a low voice when he walked past him. Mu, you're back. Chu Tian's figure was tall, half a head taller than Chu Mu. His shoulders were wide and thick, giving people a sense of steadiness. Looking at Chu Mu, he quickened his steps and walked over. The sternness on his face seemed to have been blown away by a breeze, replaced by a smile from the bottom of his heart. His tone was even a bit excited. Chu Tian raised his hand to pat Chu Mu's shoulder, but his hand suddenly froze in midair. His eyes were wide open, filled with shock and disbelief. He looked like an atheist who had suddenly seen a ghost. Chapter 60. As one of the 3 great clans of Kaiyang City, the Chu clan had a total population of over 1,000 people. It occupied a large area and was divided into many halls, courtyards, and pavilions. Chu Tian and Chu Mu arrived at the Xingyun courtyard after many turns. The Xingyun courtyard was named after Chu Xingyun. It was Chu Xingyun's courtyard, and as the clan head's younger brother, he was given this treatment. Mu, let mother see if you've lost weight. Chu Mu's mother, Li Yunlan, had tears in her eyes. She was incomparably emotional as she grabbed Chu Mu's shoulder. She carefully sized up Chu Mu, as if she really wanted to find where Chu Mu had lost weight. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Chu Xingyun laughed heartily. He wanted to take a step forward, but stopped. His voice was emotional, and his eyes were filled with restrained concern. It was hard to see what he was thinking. It was the same kind of love, but it was completely different between a father and a mother. Relatively speaking, women were more direct when it came to this kind of concern and love for their children, while men were often more reserved. But no matter what, it was still love. It was the love of a father for his children, a love that came from the heart. From Chu Xingyun and Li Yunlan's expressions, tone, and so on, Chu Mu could clearly feel this kind of care and concern. His heart felt warm, and it was very beautiful. He couldn't help but become emotional as well. He sincerely called out "Father" and "Mother" from the bottom of his heart. Chu Tian stood to the side and didn't disturb them. Although he was very anxious right now, he had something very important to tell Chu Xingyun and Li Yunlan. After a long while, Li Yunlan gradually calmed down, but she kept pulling Chu Mu's hand to a chair, letting Chu Mu sit next to her. Chu Mu didn't object, nor did he resist. He sat down naturally. This kind of experience wasn't very common. After that, Chu Xingyun, Li Yunlan, and Chu Mu chatted. They asked about life in the Green Edge sword sect, how they ate, how they lived, whether they were bullied, and so on. If it was the old Chu Mu, he would most likely feel impatient. However, the current Chu Mu was the new Chu Mu. Not only did he not feel impatient, but he also felt warmth in his heart. He smiled and answered them one by one. Mu, this time, can you stay at home for a few more days? Chu Xingyun asked. I'll try my best, but I'm afraid it won't last long. Chu Mu said. He had promised Ling Feng's sect master that he would return within 3 months. Chu Mu's own plan was to stay for a few days after the birthday celebration before returning to Sword Sect. This was because he still planned to head to the Sword Battle Arena to continue guarding the Sword Battle Arena and obtain a Qi refining pill to raise his cultivation to the peak of Stage 8 as soon as possible. Father, Mother, do you know Mu's current cultivation? Chu Tian finally found a chance to interject and immediately asked in an extremely excited tone. Chu Xingyun and Li Yunlan were stunned at first. They both knew that Chumu's talent was very ordinary. Although it was better to enter the Azure Edge sword sect than to stay in the Chu clan, in just a few months he probably wouldn't have made much progress. Therefore, they deliberately ignored this question, afraid that if they mentioned it, it would make Chumu feel uncomfortable. What they didn't expect was that their eldest son would specially mention this matter. Moreover, his tone was extremely excited, as if there was something surprising. Thinking of this, Chu Xingyun used the Qi observation technique and looked at Chumu. Then his eyes widened and his eyeballs almost fell out. His mouth unconsciously opened and his face was filled with disbelief. Seeing her husband's expression, Li Yunlan also used the Qi observation technique to look at Chumu. Her eyes were also wide open and her face was filled with shock. Seeing his parents' expressions, Chumu snorted proudly. It was as if he had shocked his parents. This made Chumu a little touched. Mu-er, your cultivation, is it real? Chu Xingyun stuttered. He was still incomparably shocked. It's real. Chumu smiled. It's really the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. Why do I feel like I'm dreaming? Chu Xingyun was still stuttering. Quickly tell us what's going on. How did your cultivation increase so quickly? Li Yunlan and Chu Tian also looked at Chumu eagerly, waiting for Chumu to explain. Chumu smiled and briefly explained what had happened. He only briefly mentioned the matter of Wang Feng. He didn't say that it was a battle of life and death, only that it was decided. Chu Xingyun, his wife, and Chu Tian listened attentively. They were very engrossed in the story. After listening to it, they let out a sigh of relief. So that's how it is. I didn't expect so many things to happen in the few months you were in the Breeze Sword Sect. Your cultivation has also increased by leaps and bounds. It's really unexpected. Chu Xingyun sighed. Li Yunlan and Chu Tian were both amazed. Er's experience is much richer than mine. Every day in the Flowing Cloud Sword Sect, I'm still cultivating. Chu Tian was a little envious. Suddenly, his expression changed and he looked at Chu Mu. That means your sword skills are very powerful now. Come, let's go to the courtyard and spar. Okay. Chu Mu didn't refuse. Chu Xingyun and Li Yunlan didn't stop him. Chu Mu's cultivation had unexpectedly reached the 8th stage. They were very shocked. At this time, they also wanted to see how Chu Mu's sword skills were. No matter what, this was the world of swordsmen. As a swordsman, he had to have a strong sword qi cultivation and exquisite sword skills to be able to survive. Tian, you have to be careful when you attack. Li Yunlan specially instructed. Don't worry, mother. Chu Tian patted his chest and promised. In the courtyard, Chu Tian and Chu Mu were 5 meters apart, facing each other. They both drew their swords. Chu Xingyun and his wife stood on the side, watching with a smile. I just broke through the 9th stage not long ago. My cultivation is at the early stage of the 9th stage. But don't worry, I will control my cultivation to be at the early stage of the 8th stage, the same as you. Chu Tian said. His aura gradually condensed, and his eyes became sharp. The sword skills that I practice are 1 entry-level sword skill, 2 low-level sword skills, 1 mid-level sword skill, and 1 mid-level sword skill. Later, I will start with the entry-level sword skill. 1 entry-level sword skill, 1 low-level sword skill, 1 mid-level sword skill, and 1 mid-level sword skill. Chu Mu entered the zone and said indifferently. This made Chu Xingyun and his wife and Chu Tian a little surprised. The difference between a low-level sword sect and a mid-level sword sect was very obvious. A mid-level sword sect only needed to send out a strong enough swordsman to sweep the entire low-level sword sect. At the same time, the difference between the two sides was obvious. Therefore, a mid-level sword sect's disciple could usually cultivate more powerful sword skills. Chu Tian being able to cultivate those sword skills was normal. but Chumu being able to cultivate one mid-level sword skill and one mid-level sword skill was a little unexpected. The two slightly different 100 refined swords faced each other from a distance. The aura of the two sides condensed and became sharp. The air seemed to be cut, and the wind blew, making a whistling sound. "Take this," Chu Tian shouted in a low voice. He took a step forward and stabbed his sword forward. This sword was upright and had the demeanor of a great general. It was like a general galloping over the battlefield. Chu Mu flicked his wrist. The snow-white sword light was like a glimpse. The sword was elegant and indifferent, like an ink painting. "Good." Chu Xingyun's eyes lit up and nodded secretly. He was very satisfied with his two sons' sword skills, although he didn't have much time to cultivate because he had to manage the family business. Chu Xingyun also had the early 10th phase, sword qi cultivation. His sword skills were also extraordinary and his eyesight was even better. Two swords crossed. Chu Mu and Chu Tian started a sword battle. The sword light flashed, and the sword shadows were everywhere. The sword qi was everywhere, and it seemed like they were evenly matched. Their figures mixed and crossed, and it was very exciting. Chu Xingyun nodded repeatedly. Li Yunlan smiled. She cared more about the harmonious atmosphere of the family. Chapter 61. In the Xingyun courtyard, there was a sharp clanging sound. It was the sound of metal clashing. Sword light flickered and sword shadows flashed. Two figures flew up and down, left and right, each with their own unique characteristics. One was straightforward and upright, with the valiant and domineering demeanor of a general. The other was elegant and leisurely strolling in the courtyard, with the pleasant feeling of a tourist amidst the wind. Chu Yunxing and Li Yunlan cheered. Suddenly, after a sharp clanging sound, the two figures flew back. "I'm not fighting anymore." Chu Tian gasped slightly and said. Chu Mu had a smile on his face. He was calm and composed. His breathing was steady, and his expression didn't change. "Tian, how is it? How's Mu-er's swordsmanship?" Chu Xingyun said with a smile, although he was watching from the side, and his eyesight was better than others, and thought that Chu Tian and Chu Mu's swordsmanship were very good. It wasn't as real as fighting in person. Very good. Although it's completely different from my style, it's catching up to me. Even if it's in the flowing cloud sword sect, it can be ranked among the many disciples. Chu Tian gave a rather high affirmation. However, he didn't know that Chu Mu didn't use his real strength when fighting with him. It was just a kind of gesture. If he knew that once Chu Mu got serious, he could defeat him in 3 moves, who knows how shocked he would be. Chu Xingyun didn't see the specifics. He only felt that Chu Mu's swordsmanship was indeed very good. It wasn't inferior to Chu Tian's. Moreover, his meridians were long. That was all. After that, Chu Mu stayed in the Xingyun courtyard. He chatted with his parents, practiced his swordsmanship, and so on. Occasionally, he would exchange a few moves with Chu Tian. 2 days passed in a flash, and the birthday arrived. The Chu clan residence was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Red lanterns hung high up in the sky. The servants and maids were all very busy. Inside and outside they were like ants. The gates of the mansion were wide open, and the guards were wearing red ribbons, looking very festive. A housekeeper of the Chu clan stood at the entrance with a few attendants. They welcomed the guests and announced their arrival loudly to let the people inside know. As one of the 3 great clans of Kaiyang City, there were many people who came to congratulate Chu Dongxiong on his 70th birthday. There were many small clans, gangs, casinos, restaurants, and even merchants. The head of the Lin clan has brought the 3rd young master of the Lin clan here to celebrate the birthday. Their gifts are 1,000 tempered swords and 10 chi-gathering pills. The head of the Lin family, Lin Feihu, was a middle-aged man with a square face, a wide nose, and a square mouth. He had a dignified aura, and he walked with a majestic gait. Beside him was a young man in his teens. He also had a square face and vaguely resembled Lin Feihu's features. However, he looked a little younger now. Like the Chu clan, the Lin clan was one of the three great clans of Kaiyang City. Therefore, Lin Feihu's arrival immediately attracted the attention of many people. Everyone smiled and greeted Lin Feihu wholeheartedly. "Hello, head of the Lin clan. We haven't seen each other for a few days, and you look even more dignified. Head of the Lin clan, the third young master is becoming more and more like you." All sorts of compliments to the head of the Lin clan or the third young master of the Lin clan came from the mouths of the people in charge of the small clans, gangs, and merchants. They were all at ease. Lin Feihu's solemn face also squeezed out a smile. He cupped his fists and casually replied with a few words. "Brother Lin's arrival brings light to my humble abode." The head of the Chu clan, Chu Hangkong, strode over. When he saw Lin Feihu, he hurriedly greeted him with a sword salute. He gave off a forthright feeling. "Today is the old master's 70th birthday. As a junior, I have to come and congratulate him no matter what." Lin Feihu also laughed and greeted him with the same sword salute. Those people from before were not as powerful as him. Naturally, Lin Feihu would just greet them and not be too courteous. However, Chu Hangkong was different. He was the head of the Chu clan. His status was not lower than Lin Feihu's, not to mention his strength. "I haven't seen you for a while. Tianling's cultivation has improved a lot." Chu Hangkong looked at the third young master of the Lin clan and smiled. "Tianling greets, Uncle Hangkong." Lin Tianling immediately greeted him with a 90-degree bow. This was the etiquette of a junior to an elder. "Haha, you're welcome." Chu Hangkong smiled and gestured with his hand. "Brother Lin, please come in. My father will be very happy to see you here to congratulate him. Please." Lin Feihu also smiled and gestured with his hand. The two of them walked side by side into the hall. Lin Tianling followed Lin Feihu and listened to the conversation between Lin Feihu and Chu Hangkong. In the Chu clan, other than the servants and guards who were busy, the direct descendants and collateral descendants of the Chu clan would help if they could. However, there were not many things that they needed to do. Chu Mu and Chu Tian were together in a corner of the hall. Other than the two of them, there were many other young descendants of the Chu clan. They were all around 16 or 17 years old. They were in groups of 3 to 5 and were discussing something in a low voice. They would glance at Chu Mu from time to time. Vaguely, Chu Mu could hear them mentioning his name. It seemed that they were discussing him. Thinking about it, he knew that the content of their discussion was most likely not praising him. If it wasn't for his big brother, Chu Tian, by his side, these fellows would have surrounded him to ridicule him and despise him. However, Chu Mu felt that they were lucky. If Chu Tian was not beside him, they would have surrounded him and mocked him. If they provoked Chu Mu, they would most likely be taught a lesson by Chu Mu. At that time, they would know how stupid they were. On the other side, there was a valiant woman. She seemed to be 1 or 2 years older than Chu Mu. She carried a sword on her back and glanced at Chu Tian coldly. There was a trace of battle intent in her eyes. When she glanced at Chu Mu, a trace of disdain flashed in her eyes. Chu Mu recognized her. She was the daughter of his second uncle, Chu Mu's cousin in name. "The Wang clan's patriarch and the Wang clan's second young master have arrived." Suddenly, a loud announcement came from outside the hall. "The congratulatory gift is a broken 100 refinement sword." The announcement stopped abruptly, but everyone heard it. For a moment, everyone stopped talking and looked at the Chu clan's gate with a strange expression. The atmosphere became very strange. They actually gave a broken sword. In the hall, the faces of many Chu clan members sank. They were vaguely angry. Giving a broken sword at a birthday was an inauspicious symbol in the ancient sword continent. It was as if it would shorten one's lifespan. It had the meaning of a curse. In short, the arrival of the Wang clan and the broken sword as a congratulatory gift made many people smell a hint of a storm coming. Everyone knew that the Wang clan did not come with good intentions this time. Chu Shinkong, who was accompanying Lin Feihu, had a trace of gloominess in his eyes. A trace of anger appeared on his face. "Brother Lin, please help yourself." "I'll go out and take a look," Chu Shinkong said in a deep voice. "I'll go with Brother Chu," Lin Feihu said. He was secretly puzzled. What the hell was Wang Ricken doing? Giving a broken sword at the 70th birthday of the Chu clan's old master? Wasn't he planning to fall out with the Chu clan? Chapter 62. Thank you to Mr. Zombie Win for your tip. This book has been taken off the list, and there are no good recommendations. It's getting harder to read it now. My collection can't increase at all. Looking at a certain part of my body hurts. The head of the Wang family, Wang Ricken, had his hands behind his back. He had a weird smile on his face, and his eyes were shining brightly. He walked into the front yard of the Chu family's mansion and snorted coldly when he saw the crowd. The second young master of the Wang clan, who was also Wang Ricken's second son, Wang Qi, stood by Wang Ricken's side. His head was held high, and his eyes were filled with arrogance. When he looked at the people from the small clans and gangs, his eyes were filled with disdain. "Qi, let's do what we agreed on before." Wang Ricken's lips moved slightly, and his voice was transmitted into Wang Qi's ears. "Don't worry, father. I will definitely make the Chu family lose face." Wang Qi didn't have the ability to transmit his voice through sword qi, so he naturally replied loudly. The people who heard him were shocked, and they felt that a storm was coming. Wang Ricken took Wang Qi and walked towards the main hall of the Chu family. "Wang Ricken, today is my father's 70th birthday. The Chu family welcomes you, but if you are here to cause trouble, then don't blame us for being impolite." Chu Shinkong strode over in a hurry. His aura was fierce and sharp, like a violent wind sweeping across the sky. He shouted. His eyes were shining with a terrifying light, which made many people from the small clans and gangs tremble with fear. "Brother Chu, what are you talking about?" Wang Ricken wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he had a weird smile on his face and said slowly, "It's old Master Chu's 70th birthday. As a junior, of course I am here to congratulate him." "Congratulate him? Don't tell me that you, the head of the Wang family, don't know what it means to give him a broken sword?" Chu Shinkong suppressed the burning anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, as the head of the family, he had to consider many things. Most of the time, he couldn't act according to his own emotions. Lin Feihu also walked over. He looked at Wang Ricken and didn't say anything. "Brother Chu, don't misunderstand. This broken sword is definitely not a curse to shorten old Master Chu's life." Wang Ricken had a faint grin on his face. "However, the reason I am here today is because I have something else important to do. I heard that some of the Chu family's outstanding disciples have joined various sword sects to cultivate their swordsmanship. I'm sure they all have good swordsmanship. This time, it's old Master Chu's 70th birthday. They should have come back to congratulate him. It just so happens that my son, Wang Qi, has returned from the sword faction. His cultivation base has increased, and his swordsmanship has also improved." Wang Ricken spoke slowly, gradually letting everyone understand his intentions. As for the Wang clan and the Chu clan, they're both part of the 3 great clans of Kaiyang City. It's just that we, the older generation, are getting old and too lazy to move. We're no longer as frivolous as we were when we were young. But now, the more outstanding youths have all joined various sword sects and rarely come back. This is a good opportunity for my son Wang Qi to get acquainted with the outstanding disciples of the Chu clan and interact with them. Otherwise, if they don't recognize each other when they're outside, it'll be a joke. Although Wang Ricken's words were pleasant to hear, how could the crowd not understand what he meant? He wanted to use this opportunity to stir up trouble. "I am Wang Qi, at the early 9th stage of the sword qi realm. I believe that my swordsmanship is not bad. Which young hero of the Chu clan is willing to give me some pointers?" Wang Qi took the opportunity to take a step forward. He cupped his hands symbolically and arrogantly swept his gaze over the Chu clan's youths. His tone was disapproving. Wang Chi's arrogance and disdain immediately angered the Chu clan's youths. Their faces were filled with anger, and their gazes were as sharp as swords, as if they wanted to pierce through Wang Chi's body. But no one dared to step forward because Wang Chi's sword Qi was at the early 9th stage. Among the Chu clan's youths, there were very few who had reached that level. Chu clan's Chu Tian, early 9th stage of the sword Qi realm. Chu Tian strode forward and said in a deep voice, looking straight at Wang Chi, "Chu Tian is also at the early 9th stage? That's too shocking." "So what?" "Chu Tian's cultivation talent is at the 7th stage, which is already relatively high. Moreover, he joined a middle-grade sword sect. On the other hand, someone with a 9th stage cultivation talent won't be able to make a comeback even if he joined a low-grade sword sect. Maybe he hasn't even broken through to the 4th stage of the sword Qi realm. Chu Tian's sword skills have always been good. In our Chu clan's younger generation, he should be in the top 3. He should be able to defeat this arrogant Wang Chi." The Chu clan's youths all began to discuss in low voices. "In order to avoid hurting our relationship, in my opinion, let's just use sword skills. Don't use any killing moves to avoid spilling blood. It's not good for the birthday celebration," Lin Feihu suddenly said. His words immediately received support. "Very good. You're the first one to step forward. I won't let you lose too badly." Wang Chi smiled proudly. "Cut the crap. Draw your sword. I'll try to be as gentle as possible." Chu Tian didn't back down. Both sides drew their swords, right in front of the Chu clan's main hall. Everyone opened up a large enough space. "Husband, should we stop Tianer?" Li Yunlan asked worriedly. "No need. As a member of our Chu clan, he should have this kind of awareness. Moreover, with Tianer's cultivation and sword skills, even if he can't defeat the opponent, he won't be injured," Chu Xingyun said. His gaze was firm, secretly cheering for Chu Tian. At this time, a tall and mighty figure quietly appeared in the main hall. When he looked over, no one noticed him. "Make your move. I'll make you speechless." Wang Chi smiled proudly, pointing his sword at Chu Tian. Chu Tian's expression was calm. He slowly pushed out his sword. This sword was upright, straight to the middle. In an instant, a majestic and fierce aura was produced. Even the air was affected and pushed forward. "Good." Everyone's eyes lit up, secretly cheering. Wang Chi was also slightly surprised. Chu Tian's first move was a bit unexpected. However, this was more interesting, wasn't it? Wang Chi also made his move. His sword slashed out at a strange angle. It was coming from a blind spot. One was straight and the other was strange. Chu Tian's wrist flickered. Sword light flickered, drawing out sword flowers. Every flower was full of majesty, shooting towards Wang Chi. Wang Chi's arm shook and the sword body trembled, turning into dozens of swords. Not only did they break the sword flowers, but they also turned into sword shadows that pierced towards Chu Tian. Chu Tian didn't show any weakness. The two swords clashed, and sharp clanging sounds were constantly heard. Sparks flew everywhere. "Good. Your sword skills are indeed beyond my expectations." Wang Chi flew back, and after putting some distance between them, he smiled. His attitude was still arrogant. "However, I already know the level of your sword skills. There's no need to continue fighting. Next, I'll use my true strength and directly defeat you. It's still unknown who will win and who will lose." Chu Tian said. Just now he had used his true strength, but he was evenly matched with his opponent. Hearing his opponent's words and seeing his confident and even arrogant face, his heart sank slightly, but he wasn't afraid. "Secret art, Gale sword arts," Wang Chi shouted in a low voice. A strong wind blew around his body, causing his black hair to flutter and his clothes to flutter. His aura was shocking. Immediately, Wang Qi's left index and middle fingers were like a sword. There was a shocking sword qi emitting from them. He gently pressed on the body of the sword, slowly wiping it towards the tip. Wherever the sword touched, a layer of light blue light could be seen on the body of the sword. It was as fast as the wind blowing towards the tip of the sword. Chu Mu, who was in the crowd, had his eyes lit up. He also had a secret art, sword qi protection, which was used to protect himself. However, he didn't know what this Gale sword arts was used for.